of the Jersey City Zoning Board of Adjustment. This meeting is held in accordance with NJSA 10:4-12, the Open Public Meetings Act. I would like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Beasley, would you please take roll call?
So I see Commissioner Patel,
Here.
Commissioner Zablicki,
Here.
or Acting Vice Chair.
Here again.
Or still. Commissioner Burns.
Here.
Commissioner Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Boyle.
Here.
And Madam Chair Coyle.
Present.
We have quorum.
Okay. Mr. Beasley, are there any sunshine announcements that you would like to share with us?
Yes, in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, notice has been provided to Bergen Records, Ellis Polito, as well as posted with the city clerk. I'd like to request to mark this as B1. Thank you.
And that's it. Okay. I'd ask everyone to please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Bridget, I'm going to ask you at this time if you could please swear in any staff that are in attendance. Okay, again, Mr. Beasley, any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Okay,
Madam Chair.
any adjournments?
No adjournments,
No
Madam
adjournments.
Chair.
Okay, so at this time we can begin. And our first case, our only case this evening, is Z19-012. It's 591 Montgomery Street. Attorney is Jennifer Porter. Okay. Before we begin, as we go through this evening, we will have comments from the public. They will be held to 3 minutes, and Mr. Barron, Commissioner Barron, will be the timekeeper on that. Okay. So we can begin.
Good evening, board members. My name, as you indicated, Jennifer Porter. I'm an attorney and member with CSG Law, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Jones Hall Associates. Notice of tonight's hearing was published and mailed in accordance with the MLUL, and I do have an original copy of the affidavit with proof of publication and mailing that I can provide.
Why don't you just give it to Bridget, and we'll mark that as A1. No. Yeah.
Great. A copy of the affidavit was also posted to the Jersey City portal, and with that, the applicant believes that the application and the board have jurisdiction to proceed. The applicant, Jones Hall Associates, is the owner of property located at 591 Montgomery Street and designated as Block 13601, Lot 1. The property is located in the R4 zoning district, and the property is improved with an existing senior living facility known as Jones Hall. Although this is the first appearance by this applicant at this board, this application was originally filed, and this is important for the background of this project, originally filed back in January of 2019. And over the last 6 years has been the subject of numerous meetings and coordination with staff, site visits, community meetings, HPC meetings, and extensive communications. As you will hear in the testimony this evening, and by way of brief background, the Jones Hall property is part of the former Jersey City Medical Center. That complex is now known as the Beacon. It is listed on the National and State Registers of Historic Places. However, the Jones Hall site itself has a slightly different but important history from the rest of the Beacon complex. The Jones Hall site was the only site that was subdivided off from the rest of the complex and sold by Jersey City into private ownership back in 1978 for development of senior housing, which is the housing that still exists today. And that was prior to the complex's National Register listing back in 1985. The Jones Hall site is not part of a locally designated historic district. It was not included as part of the city's Jersey City Medical Center study area or redevelopment plan that was adopted in 1984, or the Beacon Rehabilitation Project, which took place in the majority of the complex. It's also not part of the SHPO historic easement or associated historic tax credits for the remainder of the Beacon site. It has its own separate and distinct zoning. Nevertheless, because as I indicated before, it's within the state and national registers of this historic complex as a contributing resource, it is subject to, and very careful consideration was given with respect to the proposed design to comply with the Secretary of Interior standards, and this ties directly and appropriately guides the nature and extent of the relief that this applicant is seeking before this board this evening. By way of its relief, the applicant is seeking minor subdivision and site plan approval in order to subdivide the Jones Hall property into 2 lots, one of which will contain the existing senior housing facility, Jones Hall. On the other lot, which will be the main focus of tonight's hearing, the applicant is proposing to construct an 18-story above-ground mixed-use development. It will contain 1 story of medical use with multi-family housing above and 4 levels of parking, both at surface and underground, along with related site improvements, which you'll hear about from our witnesses this evening. In addition to site plan and minor subdivision approval, the applicant will be seeking use and variance relief, which is the reason why we're before this board. And this application, as I indicated previously, is governed by the R4 zoning that was in place at the time of application back in 19. So there have been some amendments to the zoning that have occurred since then, but this application will be governed by that zoning that was in place at the time back in 2019. And as you'll hear further this evening, the applicant is seeking 2 D variances in connection with its application. The first is to permit D1 relief for the proposed medical use, which was not a permitted use within the R4 zone back in 2019, however, currently is actually a permitted use within the R4 zone. In addition to that, medical use, which you'll hear from our experts this evening, is an inherently beneficial use and is consistent with the historical use of the surrounding Jersey City Medical Center complex that historically encaptured the site. In addition, the applicant is seeking a D6 height variance to exceed the maximum building height by 10% or 10 feet. As you will hear in the testimony, the height relief being sought is justified by virtue of the fact that it is in line with similarly tall buildings in the Beacon complex, and we'll show you a comparison and show you details in terms of what the actual building looks like in proximity to the buildings surrounding it. And further, it's justified because of the extensive consideration that went into the design of the new building in terms of its massing, typology, size, scale, and all of its architectural features, which you'll hear about tonight, to reduce or eliminate any potential impacts to surrounding properties. In addition, the applicant is seeking a series of bulk variances for both of the lots that are being split, and that will be addressed further in the testimony as well, particularly by the architect and the engineer, and then in the proofs, of course, by our planner. This application, importantly, was referred to the HPC from this board and from the planning department pursuant to section 40:55D-110 of the MLUL for review and recommendation. It is noted that for years prior to and during, it was a continued work of effort during the HPC review process, that this project has undergone numerous and extensive design iterations. There are multiple versions of this project, some of which you will see from its initial design all the way up until the finished product, which we have proposed, to this board this evening. That was a result of comments and feedback from actively engaging in multiple staff meetings and reviews with planning, HPC, as well as with the public. Thus, although the HPC did ultimately recommend against the project, and we want to put that out there and put that up front, it should not downplay the project's careful and thoughtful considerations that were acknowledged on the record by the city's historic preservation officer during those proceedings, who favorably recommended the project in his staff report and gave further testimony at those proceedings, and stated on the record, quote, "The applicants have tried extraordinarily hard to integrate this new construction into the existing site. Quote, I am at a loss now for how to direct the applicant at this point." And final quote, "I think that rather monumental effort has gone into trying to take the commission and the public's comments and integrate them into a new development." These are all part of the hearing transcripts from the HPC proceedings. We are here this evening because we believe and intend to show on the record that the proofs for the relief that we are seeking can be met, and that the relief is justified because it results in a better design that simultaneously satisfies the city's historic design standards, as our architect is going to detail for you further. So in connection with our presentation tonight, we intend to call the following witnesses. First, Richard Garber of Grow Architects, who will provide testimony on the architectural elements of the proposed building, and he'll discuss the lengthy history of the changes and how we came about to the current design, how it relates back specifically to the historic standards that we're bounded by, as well as how it meets the design criteria and the proofs in connection with the relief before this board. Second, we'll have Mark Chisvet, our civil engineer, who will walk you through the proposed site plan. He'll also speak to the subdivision, as well as specifically detail some of the bulk variances, setback variances otherwise, that are being proposed. Third, if the board would like to hear from our traffic consultant, we have Mr. Hughes present. We can have him testify with respect to the traffic impact report that was prepared, or simply answer questions. He can also address questions if the board has any with respect to the parking that is proposed for the project. And then lastly, we have Mr. Height, who is our planner, and he will provide the planning testimony at the end in support of the relief that's being sought. We do also have applicant representatives and others present that can address any further questions that the board may have. So if the board has no questions for me, I'd like to call our first witness.
Please.
Great. Mr. Garber?
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Spell your full name.
It's Richard Garber, Garber. Yeah. Did I plug the wrong one in?
Yeah, do the fabric panel one.
Yeah.
Plug time. There we go. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Great.
First, if you just want to run through your credentials, I know
Yeah,
you've previously been recommended.
Yeah, he's been before the board numerous times. We recognize
every
his
time.
expertise.
Great, wonderful. And thank you all for seeing us tonight. I know it's a special night for everyone to come out. And we really do feel that this is a kind of coming together of a lot of different sort of energies that have been involved in this project over the last, we've been working on it since about 2018. As Ms. Porter said, it was originally submitted to the city for comments in 2019. Now the building is a sister building to the Beacon. And this is a rendering that we've put up. You can probably pick out our building, but I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the design credentials of the building and why we believe that it fits into the site. I'll go through some testimony to talk a lot about the site, as well as historic design standards based on Secretary of the Interior recommendations. So I have a rather long presentation tonight, and so hopefully everyone will bear with me.
Can I just interrupt you for one moment? Can we? I don't know if this was distributed. Can we just enter it as an evidence?
Sure, we should. A2, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes, so it would
Two,
be
yes.
yes.
Yeah, and it's a presentation with how many slides there?
There are 118 slides.
Okay. Presentation with 118 slides.
So this is, we're going to start with an aerial view of our site in particular.
Excuse me, I did not say what we normally say at the beginning of the meeting, between 3 minutes for speakers, but we do stop at 10 o'clock. So you're saying you have a lengthy presentation. I don't know what anyone else has to say, so we have to keep that in mind.
We're aware,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chairman. Thank you. Yep. So I'll talk faster already. So this is our site, and it's a very interesting site in that it's a kind of corner of the Beacon, but it's also at the point where Montgomery Street, which is a major east-west thoroughfare in the city, actually passes up and over Corneliuson Avenue. So Corneliuson Avenue is some 30 feet below the height of Montgomery Street, and the frontage of our building is on Montgomery Street between the existing asset Jones Hall, which we'll talk a little bit about, and Beacon Way. So Beacon Way you see located, called out, and so the site that we're really here to talk about is here, where I'm circling with the mouse, which will be the site of our building. Now, we are requesting a minor subdivision, and as Ms. Porter said, and that would subdivide off 591 Montgomery, also known as Jones Hall, as a singular building. Now, this is an existing senior housing facility with 117 beds in it, occupied to this day. And the owner of that building, who was actually involved as this historic subdivision was going on, is here tonight. He's been operating this building since 1980, the mid-'80s sometime. What that leaves, partially because of the change in elevation, is this zigzag site that you see. Now, we're really proposing our building proper on this upper corner that you see here that's between Beacon Way and Jones Hall. But we include this because you see there's a small amount of parking here already. We've taken that parking and put it under our building, and we are proposing, instead of parking, a park. And it will be a park and rain garden, actually, that would be for the use of residents of both this proposed building as well as the residents of Jones Hall. Now, as Ms. Porter said, we are in the R4 zoning district. We have a number of different zones around us, the NC, the R1, the R1F, as well as a number of redevelopment plans. And I'll call your attention to redevelopment plan number 4. That is the Beacon redevelopment plan. And you can see when the Beacon redevelopment plan was created, which is sometime in the aughts, 2004 or 5, I think, if I remember correctly, it specifically left out our site. And the reason why it specifically left out our site was because we are not part of the historic subdivision. And I will show you some further information about that we received from the State Historic Preservation Office. The Beacon is on the State National Registry as a complex, and you can see that our site, which is that little kind of backwards L in red, is there. And what we've done is we've also drawn attention to additional historic districts that are regulated at the municipal level, right? So we have Bergen Hill, we have the downtown historic districts. We are in between those, right? And we will say that the Beacon itself is a state historic district. This is some information that we received about the easement, and this dates back from April 12th, 2019, and I'll just read very briefly. The following map plots the Jersey City Medical Center property under easement, shaded in gray. I will show you that graphic in a second. The 591 Montgomery Avenue parcel under ownership by Jones Hall Associates is a separate property shown in crosshatch. The city has renumbered the blocks and lots, and the 591 Montgomery Avenue property is located on what now is known as Block 13601, Lot 1. And it goes on to confirm that the map it confirms that the Jones Hall parcel is outside of the easement boundary. And you see that here. So the dark gray is the historic easement. That's the rest of the beacon, or all of the beacon, excuse me. And that kind of backwards L is the lot that we are speaking about. I'll go back and just make sure everyone understands that. Now, interestingly, when all this was happening, we actually contacted SHPO. We thought we would have some kind of oversight with SHPO, and I'm happy to report that we got this letter back from June 2019 that in effect says that SHPO does not have oversight over our particular lot. And this is also in the record, but you'll see this as well. But thank you again for providing the opportunity and comment on the potential for this project to affect historic and archaeological research sources and so forth. But it basically states that there is no state jurisdiction over this lot. And this letter is what led the City Planning Office to ask us to go to the Historic Preservation Commission for the recommendation that Ms. Porter spoke about. Now, we're going to talk a lot about height. We are asking for a D variance for height, and you can see our site here, which is that shaded in orange, and you can see the relative height of structures around us. The beacon structures move from about 65 feet on the low side down Corneliuson Avenue, which is more contextual with some of the low-rise buildings there, to about 360 feet at its highest. Now, these are the traditional buildings of the old medical center. And so what we are attempting to do is find an appropriate height that is somewhere between here. And you'll see from our application that the height that we're requesting is 214 feet 10 3/4 inches, which is well under certainly the highest buildings, and more consistent with some of the buildings that you see sort of more south at the southern end of the beacon. But you do note that Jones Hall, we have this listed here at 210 feet. It's actually 214 feet, so we're matching the height of the sister building. Now, this is also important because we have spent, as Ms. Porter suggested, a lot of time with Mr. Reedon, who walked us around this whole complex a couple of times, actually, and really asked us as architects to pay attention to a couple of things. He asked us to pay attention to the massing, which we'll talk about. He asked us to pay attention to materials, which we'll talk about. He asked us to pay attention to the ratio of void and plane, which means sort of solid and window, right? Decorative features. There's a fair amount of ornamentation, particularly at the base and top of these buildings, as well as setbacks. The buildings all tend to sort of wedding cake, and window color, meaning they're not reflective windows. These are just 4 of hundreds of photos that we have of the complex. I should also note that I live on Montgomery Street, very close to here, and so have spent a lot of time moving within and past these buildings. Right. Now, the other thing that I want to just kind of talk about with this slide is a few other things that we noticed in the complex, and these are significant themes that carried the way we thought about the design proposal before you. One is the recurring verticality, right? We talked about the recurring verticality that you saw in the buildings, right? The next is the color of the stone and brick masonry, right? And that we want to be consistent with that. The next was a consistent design language that has to do, again, with that stepping and the way that buildings are adorned at the base and top, and those setbacks. And those setbacks in the way the buildings wedding cake, but also the step backs as they create spaces in between one another, which is important. Right? Now, just to show, there are a number of large lots without buildings in the area. And this is to support our subdivision request. We have the Great Lawn of the Beacon. I will tell the folks from the Beacon that we are not building on the Great Lawn. I know that was a misconception that I got. The Great Lawn will stay the Great Lawn. You can see that in the upper left. You see our site labeled 593 Montgomery. You see a parking lot right across Corneliuson and Montgomery, which is a parking lot for the housing authority. as well as some large parking lots for the high school that's further down Montgomery Street, right? Now, the zoning itself. The R4 zoning is zoning from the, I don't know exactly when it was written, but what it really speaks to is many of these buildings that we see around the city that were built in the 70s and 80s, which are towers in a sea of parking, right? And so this is what is supported by the R4 zoning, which is not something that we thought was necessarily appropriate, and we'll talk a little bit about what as-of-right zoning would be later in the presentation. Briefly, we are very, very close to public transportation. There's a number of New Jersey Transit bus routes that you can see here, 6 that are within a couple of minutes walk, including one right outside the building, one across the street, and we are about a 15-minute walk to the Journal Square Path Station as well. So we are very close to public transportation, which I think is a very important goal of the overall master plan. Now, I talked a lot about recurring themes, right? And so you see in the slide to the left, the site as it exists now. You see in the slide to the right, the site with our building in it. And I hope you can notice where our building sits. It sits in the lower left. We are trying to be contextual. And one theme that even from this view, as I was looking at this slide in my office about an hour ago, I really thought is worth pointing out is that the Beacon buildings are all, for the most part, not all, bars, right? They are long, narrow buildings, and they cluster together in pairs and threes, right? And that's really what we're doing here. When you look at, for instance, the larger buildings that sit behind us here, you see 1, 2, 3 bars, and you see ultimately what we're proposing is a cluster of 2 that front Montgomery Street with our building. So I think that this view really speaks to a kind of urban contextual approach that is consistent with the existing structures that surround us. Now, further, the Beacon site plan you can see here, you see how the structures have been ultimately constructed, right? The first buildings were actually along Corneliuson. They were the Laundry and Powerhouse, the Margaret Haig Hospital, named after the mayor's wife, I believe, Fairbank Hall, as well as Holloway Hall. And these are a little less consistent. You see that the Haig building, which is on the left, is a little bit more of a donut, right? 4 bars coming together. Fairbank Hall is more squarish, and then the others are bars and kind of articulated bars that are joined together. It's when you get into the 30s, post-World War I, that you really see the bar typologies, including Jones Hall, by the way, really becoming prevalent, right? And so you see the health services building, the medical building, which is the big one, as well as Jones Hall down in the corner, right? Those are followed by subsequent buildings that infill that, again, create bar typologies that cluster together, right? And again, that's one of the things that we're really trying to do here is create a bar typology. And you'll see we have some models that we'll pull up in a second that show how we've really edited this building down so it really reads as a bar. And the final slide, you actually see our building in the context. And this also shows the heights again for everyone's reference. And these heights are to the top roof. Some of the buildings are a little bit taller. So this slide actually may have a couple of inaccuracies in it, but the buildings are all, as I said, 300 plus feet. But you see here what we're trying to do is match the height of Jones Hall, as I said before. Now, in terms of the variances, the C variances and deviations we have here are listed in orange. The Ds, which I'll talk most about, are listed in sort of cyan or light blue. And those are the building height. Again, 214 feet, 10 3/4 inches is what we're proposing. And that's sort of nested in between the building heights that we see in the surrounding context. 110 feet are required, so we understand this is a relatively severe variance, but we think the context justifies that. as well as an allowable use. And Ms. Porter talked about this. One of the things that we're doing, which we're excited about, is we're bringing a medical use back to the Beacon, right? Back to the medical center. We're imagining about 7,500 or so square feet of ground floor space that would be used for a community medical use or something similar to that. And the owner has been speaking to various proprietors about that. And then you see we do have some setback and width variances that you see, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit more in the site plan. Now, in addition, Mr. Ward and the planning office asked us to provide zoning tabulation for Jones Hall because that was, the second lot in the subdivision. So this is existing, right? And you see what's interesting is we have a number of C variances that are created. Some of these are created through the subdivision, but some of them just happen to be conditions that exist, right, in this building. And so you see there is some relief for rear yard setbacks and coverage, as well as lot width. And again, there is that D variance for building height. This is an existing building. It's existed since the late 20s. And so this is a pre-existing condition. Now, to read into the record some design key points before I show you the plans. We have a proposed lot area of 28,301 square feet. We have a lot width on Montgomery Street, so the frontage of 126 feet. On Corneliuson Avenue, down below, we have a frontage of 119 feet 3 inches. Lot coverage, we are proposing 56%. Building coverage on the ground floor, we are proposing 33%. The building stories is 18, and that is counted from Montgomery Street. We have 4 subsurface stories that are parking. And then that building height, as I mentioned before, 214 feet, 10 3/4 inches. The setbacks, so at the parking levels, which are below grade, we really have no setbacks. We're right at the lot line, and that's because we want to maximize that for parking. But you'll see, in keeping with that kind of form making of the medical center itself, that we do step back quite a lot as the building moves up. And I'll talk about all of these as we go through. In terms of our proposed building area, we're proposing 182 feet. 182,754 square feet, 98 residential units. We do not need a density variance. This is as of right. This is 46 one-bedroom units, 52 two-bedroom units. There are 75 parking spaces proposed over 4 levels. For that we don't need a variance either. 49 would be for the residents, and 26 would be gifted to Jones Hall to make Jones Hall compliant, by the way. So Jones Hall, being a senior living facility, basically has a very low parking requirement. I think 0.2 cars per dwelling unit or per bed. So there's not a lot there. 65 bicycle parking spaces are provided. Obviously, this is an elevator building, fully ADA accessible. The community health care, that medical use I spoke about, is on the first floor. I'll show you in a second. 7,184 square feet. And there's a common gym and amenity space proposed for residential tenants, which would be cross-used by the Jones Hall tenants in the building, as well as numerous private decks and balconies that you'll see because of the setbacks. Okay, so getting into this, this is the site plan at Montgomery Street. And so you see that we have a series of entries. The entries are coded in the orange outline triangle. We have a main pedestrian entry that is centered on our building, and the main healthcare entry, which is at the corner of Beacon Way, so on the west side of the building. And then you see that our first setback that we take is actually at the plaza level, right? And I'll talk about those setbacks in a second. So the building sits within a public plaza, which we think is important, and that also follows the kind of logic of the building being 4-sided. You can see all 4 sides, just like the rest of the Beacon. The medical center, I should say. You can see that proposed rain garden and park. That's about a 5,600 square foot footprint on the lower on the lower side on Corneliuson Avenue, as well as the driveway to get into the parking structure, which is between that park and the existing Jones Hall. We have a drop-off zone. We have pedestrian and vehicular circulation here, and this slide is pretty minor, but I do want everyone to know we've really thought about dumpsters and staging for trash removal and so forth, and that will all happen via that access driveway from Corneliuson. Now, we did a lot of massing. So this is an elevation. I'm going to talk a lot about this elevation as we go on. But this is an elevation as Montgomery Street moves up. So you can see Montgomery Street is slightly rising here. And you see Jones Hall here. You see our proposed building here. And then you see just massed the taller buildings, the Capitol, the Rialto, the Orpheum, and the Mercury Lofts, which are considerably taller, 300 plus feet, up to 360 feet is, I think, the Rialto, right? And so we do feel that this is a contextual response, right? Now, in speaking, how does this relate to the Secretary of the Interior standards? First, we want to acknowledge the monumental scale of the medical center and this new addition, right? We want to emphasize the vertical, and you can see clearly that the vertical is emphasized contextually, right? We want to add decorative features that are consistent with our study of other buildings on the site, however, reinterpret them in a somewhat more modern or contemporary way. And the reinterpreting of that decoration is actually important to us as architects. We want to maintain materials of note, primarily that sort of tan brick, as well as some bronze that is found on the site. And what we're trying to do is narrow the building, and you'll see this in the next view a little bit more clearly. We're narrowing that midsection of the building here, right? So we have a clear base, middle, and top. And what that does is that's consistent with other buildings in the Beacon, and what it allows for is opening up the view corridors through the buildings, consistent with the Beacon. So we feel that this building honors the existing resource, but is distinguishable from it. And we've really thought about construction, speaking with Mr. Reedon and others from his office in terms of the panels that we're imagining that you'll see. Now, this is a graphic that we showed at the HPC showing the setbacks in Axon, and this building has slendered quite a lot. And maybe I can show, do we have those models? I'm just going to pass around some models, just the two. I really don't want to go into the past, but I'll pass these around. And by the way, one of them is the base is coming off, so just be careful with it. But this is one of the previous schemes that we have. And you can see in plan that this building was totally square. And this is the proposed building that we have in front of you as represented in this graphic. And you can see that it's more rectangular. It's more of a bar. That step back is more consistent with the Beacon itself. So, that's not face. You guys just, the glue just, have fun. Toys. Now, what that means as we move, we had a big model too that we thought we didn't bring, but as some folks here have seen the big model that we have. You see the massing design here as it relates to those graphics and the models before you, right? The building wedding cakes, right? And so you can see how we have a series of we're showing the tower at the Beacon as a comparison on the left and our building on the right as we go up. So you see how the building form, while not totally mimicking, follows the logic of getting more slender as you move up. And this was something that was really important, and hopefully you could see that in our models that we're passing around. Now, to take you through the plans, we have one subsurface level under Corneliuson Street. That is a subsurface parking level. You can see the circulation and the ramps as they move through, and we have about 23 spaces per level, given the site and the circulation. So what you see on the right is Jones Hall, and you see our building here. So Montgomery Street is here, and then the circulation in, which you'll see on the next slide, is over here. And so that looks like this. So again, so this is the what we call basement floor 1. This is the sort of ground floor at Corneliuson. And the one thing that you'll notice is we have a dedicated loading zone in front of the elevators. That's actually for an ambulance. So we're imagining that for the medical use, there'll be a dedicated place for ambulances to pull in and out. And there are a series of elevators that take you up into the building. One will be dedicated for the medical use as well. So you see 3 elevators, 2 will be for the residential, 1 will be for the medical use. And you see where the bike storage is located, as well as a trash compactor room. And then we have some other features here, the sprinkler pump room and things like that we've tried to think about. Second floor above Corneliuson, still parking. And then the 3rd floor, which is basement floor 03, above Corneliuson, is still parking again. And again, we're consistent. We have that 20 to 24 spaces. And that brings us up to Montgomery Street, and that's the ground floor. So here we have the ground floor of Montgomery Street. You'll see we have fenestration, similar to those models, that allows for a kind of proud projection of the residential entry. So you see the residential lobby in the center. You see our elevator bank with our stairs tight together. And then you see this U-shaped space, which is the healthcare lobby and the healthcare space. Now, we've laid it out as just exam rooms and things like that, but ultimately the proprietor will tell us, what they need in that space. But here you begin to see setbacks as listed in our zoning tabulation, as well as some dimensions that we start establishing from other buildings, right? So on the corner here, we have a 10-foot setback. Where's my mouse? Here. In the rear from our lot line, we have a 25-foot setback. That 25-foot setback puts us at the Montgomery Street elevation 31 feet 5 inches from the Rialto, which is a healthy distance, and 20 feet from Jones Hall, our sister building. I just lost my mouse. Here it is. And that's obtained through a 10-foot setback that we're creating here in the proposed subdivision. Now you'll notice there is a historic wall that rounds the block. We are creating an opening in that wall. We've chosen a location that is consistent with the healthcare entry, and that also happens to be one of the only locations where that wall happens to be on our property. So we can actually open up the wall there, and obviously that will be opened up and treated as the historic asset that it is. We've had a lot of discussions with Mr. Reedon and his team about that. Now, as the building goes up, you see that we have on the 2nd floor a series of spaces. This is the first residential floor that begins here. And we have that mix of 2 bedrooms and 1 bedroom. So I'm not going to go into the unit design. I don't think I need to. But you see that there's a couple of things that continues to happen in the building. We're still in the base of the building, so that entry is still proud. And then we have corners that are still proud as well, right? And that gives that sort of urban form that we're picking up from our fairly exhaustive study of the Beacon. You see that 768-foot gym, which is an amenity space that will be used for residents of this building as well as Jones Hall. You might have seen there's a gym in the lower level as well. That's a kind of rehab gym that could be imagined for tenants of people in the medical use. Now our 3rd floor pretty much stacks. You could see that here. So the setbacks that you see are more or less maintained. And what that's doing is it builds up a 3-story base before our first setback, right? And you could see that in the models. Maybe I'll use the model here. So that 3-story base is here, and you can see these elements that are proud setting up that base. And I'll talk a lot about the materials in that in a second. So the 4th floor, we begin setting back in the rear, and we have a series of private decks as well as a common deck and another amenity space, a 768-foot club room for the residents of the building. And we think this is great. And one of the things I really like about this building, we don't get to design buildings that wedding cake so much, and there really is an opportunity for a lot of exterior space in this building. And that's something that we really like in our work. Now, the 5th floor really takes a U-type shape, right? And so you can see that back here. And what that's setting up is a couple of legs for some more units while the building is low before this middle section really kind of takes off and really takes that kind of bar shape and plan that I was speaking about, right? So you can see that the setbacks are increasing here. So now we were 31.5 from the Roxy. We're now 39 feet from the Roxy on the lower right. We're 50 feet to the middle line here of the building from our lot line, 32 feet back from the other beacon sites, and we're still 10 feet on the Beacon Way side, 1310. So you can start seeing how the building is setting back, right? And that continues all the way up. The middle of the building, and you'll see how we're treating that in elevation, is probably the most repetitive part. We have floors 7 through 14 here. And this is, again, 2 very tight stairwells and our elevator core. And then we have that mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms around. So that's something that recurs on every floor. After the 14th floor, we really start articulating that height, that top, right? So we have base, middle, and top. And here we have private roof decks all around. And on this floor and the remaining floors, there's only 4 units, which is actually pretty cool, right? There's like it's relatively exclusive for a rental building, 4 units as you go all the way up, and there's going to be some really nice views and things like that here. And you can see at this point, because we're setting back, we are very, very far at this point, relatively speaking, from the buildings around us. We're 60 feet 5 inches from Jones Hall. We're 54 feet 6 inches off our rear lot line. 60 feet 5 inches from Jones Hall, and then 54 feet 6 inches from our rear lot line. The 16th floor is shown here. Again, 4 units. This steps back a little bit further. 17th floor, and then finally our 18th floor, which concludes the residences, and that's really at the top here, right? And so you see there's even a step between 14, 15, and then 16, 17 that happens in that model that I passed around. At the top, we do have a common roof deck that's accessed through elevators and the stairs. That's an elevator lobby that you see there in white. And then I thought I'd show this. Mr. Shizvet will talk about this, but the JCMUA came back to us and asked us to look for some opportunities for green roofs on the building. And so this is a very simple one that we came up with quickly. 821 square feet of green roof can be achieved by just planting that penthouse on top, not the penthouse, the bulkhead, excuse me, the elevator bulkhead on top of that top floor and roof deck. Now, you saw this in the plans, but just these are some zoomed in views of our proposed refuse and bike storage plans. Bike storage and trash removal happens out the Corneliuson entrance. Corneliuson is the minor street, I would say. It's also 30 or 33 feet lower than Montgomery Street, so you see that here. And then the elevation. So we'll talk a lot about these, but these are the 4 elevations. So the elevation on your left is the Montgomery Street elevation that I've talked a little bit about already. And then you have the 2 side elevations, the 2nd and 4th, and then the rear elevation, which is the elevation that faces south, which is the 3rd. We're going to talk a lot about the materials and the detailing in the subsequent slides. So that main elevation, again, one of the things that was super critical based on our study of the existing structures is to really articulate difference in the base, the middle, and the top, right? And so the base is the series of entrances for the lobby and for that medical use. We're using fritted glass as well as ornament. The middle of the building, which is floors 4 or so through 14, is really a series of fluted brick that goes up, and I have details of that, that really makes for the central mass of the building. And then that wedding caking, as if that's a term, really is apparent at the top where we're setting back every 2 floors or so. We have a series of glass railings. I do have some material samples that we can pass around of the tan brick, as well as some of the metal panel. There's a lot of bronze metal panel that we're proposing as well. So this is the brick that you could pass around. It's a dolomite gray, that kind of tan brick, as well as 2 samples of bronze color that is adorned, the darker color more at the base of the building, and then the lighter color more as we move up. I was just talking to someone the other day that said, since we're back from COVID, no one brings materials to the boards anymore, so I thought it was important to do so today. So, and those materials are all listed on the side of the building also. And what's interesting about this, as I go through the elevations, you see that we do have a kind of recurring window pattern. And that recurring window pattern is adorned with a dark aluminum. There are dark aluminum windows. They're framed with a kind of so-called hopper, and then a kind of panel that's above it. Sometimes there's a fixed panel, so you see the window patterns. And what I really want to draw attention to in these elevations, and I have some zoom in of this as well, zoomed in images of this, fritted glass at the base. We have that decorative brick, and you can see that the brick is more, there's more difference in it toward the center of the building. And then as it fans out to the edges, it becomes more flat. And that's another deco style of detailing that we picked up on, that we thought was important to kind of pick up on in our building. Glass railings, and as I get through the elevations, I'll zoom in and you can see some of the ornament that is clearly seen in this view, the south elevation on top of the building, as well as in some of the lower portions of it. Now, I thought I'd just show this building section that just shows the kind of organization that I just took you through. So as I said, 1 subsurface parking level, 3 parking levels from Corneliuson. We have that main plaza level at Montgomery, lost my mouse again, here with the entry, and you can see that entry is clearly proud with decorative elements. Then the middle mass of the building, which is all the residential units that you see. And then we start stepping up at that 14th floor, and you can start seeing the darker ornamental panels that begin adorning it. So we demarcate the base, we demarcate the end of the middle, and we demarcate the top. And this is all detailing that is sympathetic to what we've learned about in the beacon itself. This is a diagram I thought I'd show that just shows glass to solids, and you will see, admittedly, that compared to Jones Hall, we do have a little bit more glass. I think that's appropriate given the contemporary living condition today. And I will remind everyone that when these buildings were built, the technology for glass was not such that you could get really large glass panels, right? And so that's one of the reasons why you see smaller punched windows in the beacon. I have a series of renderings. So you see in elevation these details, again, of that base, that middle, and that top here. More graphics of that. And then we've really worked on a lot of line drawing. So this is the base of the building. I have some renderings of this also, where we have the entry for the residential, the entry for the healthcare. We have awnings on both sides that symmetrically frame that entry, which is 1 story taller. And then we have that fritted glass, again, lost my mouse, that is on both sides. And that's where we terminate to that middle of the building. And you can see in this view how the brick pattern really is more intense in the center, and it fans out to lesser and lesser to almost flat at the corners of the building, right? And that continues up through as we really take the step backs and mix a series of ornamental brick with the kind of decorative ornamental top of the building that you see here. And then that glass frit pattern at the base is here. And then I have a series of colored elevations of what that brick looks like. So if you look down below, now this obviously has to go through a kind of structural design and a detailed design, but we know how to do this. These will probably be precast panels, still to be determined, but we will have a series of brick members that are proud. Mr. Ward asked for mock-ups should this building be approved, and we're happy to provide that and continue working with the planning office on that. So you see a series of those details. So this is that kind of more intense brick at the center of the building, and then as we fan out, it begins getting flatter. And so you see here the relationship of that kind of fluting, if you will, in both elevation and plan. And then some further details, as well as the bas-relief that we picked up from looking at the decorative panels that exist within the medical center complex. These would be in bronze, decorative bronze. And at the top of the building, there are glass rails that we're imagining so that they disappear, really kind of showing those ornamental elements and not bogging the building down with like railings, right? Now, what does the building look like from the street? Right? I just took you through a lot of the detail and the logic for the massing, right? We took a series of views from up and down Montgomery Street, from Summit and Fairmont, as well as all the way down sort of further south from Johnston and Grand, right? Now, so this is the view from Summit and Fairmont, and I'm happy to report that you can't see the building. The building is outlined, is dashed in green here, and in white here, and it's behind the green Fairmont sign. It is not seen from this view. This is something that Mr. Reedon asked for. Now, where it is seen from, obviously, is from Montgomery Street. So this is the view from Montgomery and Baldwin, where we're really looking, if you remember what I said about the kind of pairing or clustering of buildings together. So we see the three tall clusters here, and then you see our building clustering with the sister building, Jones Hall, as part of this. This is the view from Johnston and Grand, where you see that kind of ornamental top of our building that I think blends well with the ornamental tops of the rest of the beacon. It tries to be deferent to the buildings around it. And then I like this view. This is further down Montgomery Street by the Turnpike overpass. And so this is a view that you'd see looking up. You can see the Housing Authority building sort of in front of us, and our building sits as you see it there, behind Jones Hall, actually. Right? One more, and then just some renderings that try to take you through the thought that we have in terms of the detailing that we put into this. And again, this was all done with a careful study of not only the Beacon complex, but the Secretary of the Interior standards that really led us to kind of subdivide the building into that base, middle, and top, modulate the scale, the relationship of openings to solids, and so forth. And you can see that here as well. You can see the bronze material that I passed around, as well as that dolomite gray brick, which is really a tan brick here. And then some views of it from the street that are zoomed in that really kind of show the building itself. Now, I'm going to try to do this quickly. We do have 10 historic standards that we want to talk about. The first is site and setting, and the way that we are interpreting that is looking at the massing, the scale, and the materials of the Beacon complex, and utilizing similar materials, sometimes in a creative and new way, but really trying to be both deferential, but also and acknowledging those materials, but also setting our building off so that it is understood as a later addition to this complex. And that's certainly a repetitive theme that we see in all of the Beacon buildings. You saw this slide before, I talked about it. Building height is another historic design standard, and we attempted to be sympathetic and to the taller buildings. We didn't want to overtake them, and we thought it would be good to match in height our sister building, Jones Hall. By the way, Jones Hall looks a little lower than our building here just because of the slope of Montgomery Street, but it's imagined at the same height. Front facades and the articulation of bases are very, very important. And what we see in many of the buildings, most of the buildings, is a kind of articulated and heightened central entry. So this is Albloz's, as it used to be called, Hall, now Jones Hall, 591 Montgomery, our sister building, and this says it quite well. And this is very typical for many of the buildings, that there's a further articulated entry that's central to the building that we are tapping into. The relationship of unbroken planes to voids, that is in both the kind of relationship of glass to solids, windows to voids to solids, but also the rhythm of the buildings itself. So you see here in Jones Hall that the corners flare, and we have a sort of middle flare as well, and that's what we're attempting to do here, right? While still thinking about that stepping in terms of the planes that you see, right? So the buildings don't seem like big boxes. They actually get slender as they go up and are more designed, which is important, I think. And then the relationship of vacant land to building structures. This is one that I think is best if you recall the aerial view where I talked about the clustering of the bars in threes, and we're trying to do that in twos here. The projection of exterior elements to the street, I've talked about that a bunch. You see that here. As well as the brick that I passed around in terms of a relationship of new to the major exterior building materials, which is brick masonry, right? And then roof forms, again, the articulation after a common middle, a more repetitive middle, a more ornamental and differentiated top is a roof form that we see in the Beacon that, again, I've talked about here. The visual imagery of appurtenances, that just has to do with how roofs are articulated. And then the scale of buildings, and that one I've talked about a bunch. This was one of the standards that we really sought to try to speak to, and I think I've shown a number of images that do that. Signage, this is the same slide you saw before, but the signage is going to be a deco signage in nature, utilizing both the font and the materials, which is a lot of bronze, in our building to match the existing. And then site planning, again, I think I've talked a bunch about. Off-street parking is handled through an accessory garage. You can see here a description. All garage facades shall be in character with the immediate surrounding historic properties and must be compatible. What we've tried to do in dealing with that is pushing our garage down and having it accessible from Corneliuson, right? So all of these standards, and we iterated this. And when we received the historic report from Mr. Reedon that Ms. Porter spoke about, I thought I'd just kind of grab some of the commentary from the testimony. But you can see, you could read it yourself, but on the right, Mr. Blazak, one of the commissioners, who actually is one of the only historically trained commissioners on that board, I might add. Well, other than that, what they've already done, and Mr. Reedon responds, other than what they've already done, I mean, I've noted, I've jotted down a couple of things. Sorry. I've jotted down a couple of things, such as reintroduce the metal grills at the roof line, which you saw, to join brick piers together, which you saw. Those are very small things. And then more importantly, I think a rather monumental effort has gone into trying to take the commission and the public's comments and integrate them into a new development. And so that's what I hope you've seen before you. Now, I just want to talk very, very briefly about existing zoning, right? The existing zoning is the R4 zoning, and we were encouraged to look at what that might be, right? And so this assumes the subdivision that we have here that you've been seeing. And what we've done is just taken the building that would be permitted based on setbacks and tried to put it in here. And so what you see is a kind of rather almost like an M-shaped form that snakes around Jones Hall. We have a 10-foot front yard on Beacon, which I just highlighted, a 10-foot front yard on Montgomery, a 10-foot side yard along Jones Hall, a 10-foot side yard on the rear of Jones Hall. You're following this around, right? The 10-foot front yard at Corneliuson, a 10-foot side yard at the Roxy, and the 10-foot side yard perpendicular to Beacon Way that's capped with the 25-foot rear corner radius. And what that really gives us is a box, right? This is what the as-of-right zoning would ultimately be. We could go to the planning board. We could say this is what we want to do. And I would like to give the owner credit, the owner of Jones Hall, because this is not what they want to do. This is not what we want to do. We think that this really flies in the face of the seriousness with which we've approached this project and really tried to work with the design standards that I've talked about that really get us to this that you see here. And this is another view of that M-shaped straight up box compared to our articulate and I think appropriate building. Now, design iterations. I'm just going to show a few of them. We see, I think there were a total of 7 iterations. You see 3 of them here. The first was a more contemporary application of paneling. The second brought color in, but was still metallic. The third iteration, which is before you, is when we brought brick in and really took more seriously those Secretary of the Interior standards, where we're now looking at changing that more squat form that was more square to the more sleek and tall form that you see on the right, which is, in my opinion, consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards. And you see another view here of those early iterations that started in 2019 all the way through to what we have in the current proposal, which is on the right today. And then this is a graphic that shows actually those 2 models that I passed around in terms of the slendering of the building that I spoke about. I'll just go through these quickly. Finally, shadow studies. So all buildings cast shadows, we know that. And what we are seeing here, this was run on the winter solstice, December 21st, 2024, which is now in the past. We always look at the winter solstice as the most severe because the sun is lowest in the sky. And so we tend to get the most shadow casting there. And I think when you look at this animation, what you see is many of the existing buildings actually are casting shadows on our site, which is very, very important. And that goes to that height diagram that I showed you before, where the Rialto and some of the other buildings in the medical center are 300 plus 345, 360 feet. So those are casting long shadows. And you see that here in the winter, which is the most severe. Our building pretty much casts shadows onto Montgomery Street, right? Public right-of-way. It does not cast shadows back to the Beacon at all because of its location at the northernmost tip of the site. Now, the spring and fall, this is March 21st, which just happened, and September 21st. You can see again that the largest shadow casting is happening from the Beacon buildings, the medical center buildings, which is important to note. And again, when the sun is lowest in the sky at the end of the day and the beginning of the day, the longest shadows are cast, and particularly in the evening, those taller buildings are casting shadows on our site. And then finally, the summer, we are less concerned about the summer because the sun is highest in the sky. And so we're seeing that during the day, there's fairly minimal shadow casting happening, even from the buildings that are much taller than us. And I think that's important. At the beginning of day and end of day, it's when the sun is at a different angle, it's obviously casting deeper shadows. But we're really concerned with that, say, 9 to 5 type time when the shadows are pretty mitigated. And so this is Montgomery Street. You saw this rendering before. This is where most of those shadows are going to be cast. And I will conclude with a final image, which is the same image that I started with, that shows hopefully our sister building blending in well with Jones Hall and being deferential to the rest of the Beacon, the rest of the medical center. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Yes.
So at this point in time, does the board wish
We'll
to
hold
allow for
out-
questions
we'll
or
hold out
proceed to the
questions
next
to the
witness?
end, yes.
Great. Great. So for our second witness, we'd like to call Mr. Chisvat, our civil engineer.
Can you put it up again? I have another.
Yeah.
Right. Do you need a break yet? Okay.
Oh, let's hear this guy.
You have USB, you have HDMI?
Here's-
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And state and spell your full name for the record.
Mark Chisvet, Chisvette.
Again, Mr. Chivets has been here a number of times, and we recognize his expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to start with the survey. The survey was not prepared by our office, it was prepared by Feraldi Group, and we used that as their background for all our plans. But I want to start with that because you can get a better feel for the property itself. So what you're looking at is the survey. This is not a site plan. This is just an existing conditions plan. As you can see, just to get yourself oriented, let me just zoom out just a little bit more. So Montgomery Street is at the top, and Cornelison is on the right side. Beacon Way is at the upper left, and Jones Hall is the gray shadowed structure that's in the northeast corner of the property. So I'm just going to outline with my pointer the property itself. It's got a little bit of a dog leg in back and down at the bottom along with Cornelison. Existing, there is a parking lot that's fronting along Cornelison, and then the upper portion of the property, the back, that near Beacon Way, is existing as concrete patio. And there's a sloped lawn in between those two. There's a considerable slope, Mr. Garber mentioned. The grades along Cornelison are around 9 and 10 in elevation, and the grade up at Montgomery Street, where he described the connection, we were going to open that existing wall, is at 45, so 35-foot difference in grade. I'm going to switch to the site plan for a moment. 45 is the elevation, 35 is the difference in height. Going to the site plan, As Mr. Garber explained, the building is focused on the upper portion of the property, which is to the upper left of the plan, near Beacon Way, at the very extreme northwesterly corner, fronting on Montgomery Street. We will be open to removing 2 sections of the wall that exists that wraps around the site, and that will allow pedestrian connection from the public sidewalk on Montgomery to the plaza level sidewalk that surrounds the building at that level, which is around elevation 45. Access to the site from vehicles would be off Cornelison, and that's a driveway, more or less where the existing curb cut is now, and that will enter into the garage that's a couple levels below the plaza level, because the driveway is graded so that it's ADA compliant. It's not more than 5% in slope. And then what was the parking lot area, we were proposing a park in that area. The park is going to consist mostly of lawn, trees around the perimeter, and permeable paver walkway. Now, Mr. Garber alluded to it. We've had some discussions with the MUA, and these plans have been in front of the MUA for a number of years. They're essentially the same as they were 5 years ago as far as the site plan goes. A lot of changes have taken place at the building. Not that much has changed with the site design. But since that time, there have been some changes in the stormwater ordinance, and the MUA has asked that we try to implement some what they call green infrastructure elements to the site. So although not shown on this plan, we've agreed as a condition of approval that we will implement. Mr. Garber mentioned about 800 and plus square feet of green roof that will be added. In addition to that, there's about 300 square feet of planters that are placed scattered across the perimeter of the plaza area. Those are 36-inch deep planters. Those aren't 6-inch planters. Those are fairly deep, and so they can get some sizable plants in them. And then along the at the park area, kind of parallel with Cornelison, we will have a bio retention, which is like a rain garden, bio retention area. So the lawn that you see here, about a third of that lawn, about 900 square feet of that lawn, will become a bio retention area. I will move to the next slide, which is the grading and utility plan. And you can see in that area where the parking lot is, we have proposed a fairly substantial underground detention system. And that's going to be underneath the lawn area that was the park. So I'm going back to here again. And also working with MUA, we've agreed that that detention system will be perforated pipe, as long as we will confirm with soil borings that the groundwater is below the level of that, but I'm pretty sure it is. That will allow a lot of that detention to perk back into the ground. So it will reduce some of the actual flow. So as you know, how detention, it reduces the peak rates of flow, but it doesn't necessarily reduce volume. But in the case of being a perforated pipe and having the bioretention, which will absorb and allow evapotranspiration of the water, that will also take some of the volume out, and so will the green roof take some of the volume out. And in addition to that, what we've called for on the plans that were submitted to you a couple of weeks ago show stone pavers, but we will replace that with permeable pavers, again, in an effort to try to reduce the runoff volume of the site. The site is actually not a major development under the stormwater ordinance rules that existed when we submitted these plans. And it is not a major development under the definition that exists even today with the DEP. Even still, we have a sizable detention basin, and we are reducing peak flows for the 2, the 10, and the 100-year storms to the 50%, 75%, 80% that's required by your current ordinance. There is an enlargement of that park area that we're showing here. Entrance to that park will be a gate off of Cornelison, and like I said, about 1/3 of that lawn area will be by our retention. We are proposing trees throughout the park area in addition to trees along Cornelison, those street trees that are proposed. Going back to the site plan, sorry, I apologize for flipping back and forth, but I wanted to try to show the orientation of the park with the detention. There is a proposed trash area off the entry driveway that that's accessible from Cornelison, and off of that there's a pullover parking space for drop off at the bottom of that driveway, which will also allow pedestrian drop off to the Jones Hall residency. The parking lot that had been in the area where the park is now proposed, as Mr. Garber mentioned, we are going to allow for spaces, allotted spaces within the parking garage for the Jones Hall residents, so they don't lose parking. Now I'm going to move to the grading and drainage plan. Again, the utility plan, all the utilities are off of Cornelison. There is everything, the water comes down from the building, comes down the driveway, through the detention system, and then out to a manhole on Cornelison on the existing combined sewer, and also the water and the sanitary sewer, electric, everything will be coming off of Cornelison. There will be a transformer pad on the driveway, or adjacent to the driveway, I should say, just off the driveway, near the building, right next to where the trash area is going to be located, and so the power will come in underground to that, and then go into the building from that point. We have a connection, like I said, we talked about a connection on right in the area near where Beacon Way meets Montgomery Street. That's the opening, and that's where the main pedestrian entryway will be into the proposed site. So I don't know if you have any other questions. I'll be brief because I think the most important focus is on the building and the massing of the building. And
Mr. Chisvet, could you go over the signalization at Mills and Montgomery Street, the pedestrian crossing and the bus stop?
Yes, there's. Let me zoom in on that. It's a little. It gets a little bit crowded in that area, so we're proposing to just relocate a couple of the signal standards, and so that it's not interfering with the movement, because there's not much width in that area along the sidewalk, because the way the wall that exists sort of has a bend and a jog in it. It kind of eats into the right-of-way, and so in order to allow for more fluent passing of pedestrians to walk through that area and get past the pedestrian signal that's there, we're proposing just to move it a little bit closer to the curb, just to open that gap up a little bit.
Thank you. Just for the board as well, there's also proposed bollards at the end of Mill Street to just harden that edge, just in case someone goes straight into this new opening. And a bus stop is considered, but will be worked on with staff, similar to the bus stop island you see at the Grove Street Path Station currently. So that's what's shown on this drawing as well.
Yes, thanks for bringing that up. Do you have any questions?
We'll hold our questions till the end.
Okay.
Okay. We'll take a break, Bridget. Okay. All All right, at this time, we're going to take 10 minutes, 15 minutes. What do you need? 10? Okay, so it is 7:40, so we'll be back at 7:50. It again? Once my board members come in? I know. Okay, Ms. Porter, this is your next.
So at this time, I'd like to ask the board, we do have an additional witness, our traffic consultant, but I leave it to the discretion of the board. We're more than happy to go directly to our planning testimony, which would be concluding our testimony, unless the board would like to hear from our traffic consultant.
I think at this time we want to hear from the community as well. So, and it's 10 to 8. So I think we should proceed with Mr. Height and then see if we need to hear from the traffic planner at that time.
Right, and to the extent that there are questions that come up,
Exactly.
certainly we can recall him.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Spell your name for the record.
Yes. Good evening, Charles Height. Last name is spelled Heydt. Good evening, board members. I have appeared before this board.
Yes, we
in many
recognize
years.
your expertise.
I still remain a professional planner in the state of New Jersey.
They haven't taken your license yet, is that correct?
No, they take the
Good.
dues. That's what they do.
Good.
But I have been a part of this project since its early inception in 2018 with the design team, through many of the iterations on considering the balance between really what we're presenting this board is respectful design with historic architecture, as well as good planning principles. So I will also say that most of the time I appear to this board asking for relief because certain aspects of a project might not comply fully with the zoning. And usually the case is because we have an interesting setting. Aspects of the property, dynamics, and neighborhood might present itself where a proposed design does have better alternatives, better planning strategies that lend itself to what we're proposing. So I do know that every project might have impacts on the neighborhood. We'll go through some of them. Much of what I can rely on was presented to this board by Mr. Garber, so I have a truncated presentation from him that I will just reference some of the visuals that he shared. But it's not lost on us that every development, whether small or big, has impacts on an existing community. As a planner, I can tell you that through this design process, we are looking at existing impacts on the neighborhoods today, but also what those lasting impacts will be for generations to come, and some of the benefits that development will bring not only for residents today, but for future residents that will enjoy this neighborhood, have access to all the added benefits of the existing infrastructure and the proposed development. So with that, I'll get directly into the variances. I think it's easiest to digest instead of doing it by topic is by lot. We are requesting a proposed subdivision. And the short approach to this is to try and isolate the existing Jones Hall at 591 property, provide it sufficient setbacks, but also balance the existing footprint of that building, the coverage on this property, and the residual area was transitioned to the proposed lot 1.02, and we're able to achieve a few benefits in that strategy. One being the park, two being the parking, and also the stormwater management, which doesn't exist today. So with respect to the subdivision, we're at the corner of Cornelius and Montgomery. There is a topographical change along these facades. The overall lot width is one of the first relief needed for this, what would be the new corner lot, encompassing the existing Jones Hall building. The requirement is 100 feet. We're proposing it at 92 feet. So we're 8 feet shy, roughly along Montgomery Street, In my opinion, I think that's essentially where we wanted to land. You'll hear some of the dimensions for proposed lot 1.02, and basically splitting this frontage evenly between both lots. The next two are related to setbacks. The minimum side yard requirement is 15 feet. We have that being proposed at 10 feet. Again, when we set the minimum lot width to balance the two frontages on Montgomery, 10 feet was the comfortable setback that we felt necessary to give some space and separation for the existing Jones Hall, and maintain the light and air in the area for that property. When you get to the rear yard, we're working off of the prior zoning, which essentially establishes 2 front yards, 2 side yards, and we're introducing the rear lot point. So here, in this case, the rear lot point requirement is 40 feet. In this setting, we are trying to tailor the lot to provide for a necessary setback for each side in terms of 2 side yards, so we don't have a notch in the block. This really isn't an interior corner of a block, so that's where we're proposing 27 feet as the minimum distance to that rear point. So again, 40 is required, and we're proposing 27. I should also say from an existing standpoint, not measuring from property lines, the nearest structure is about 118 feet away. So whether it's side yard or rear yard, we have substantial space and distance from the existing structures in the area. The nearest point to the proposed structure on what will be lot 1.02 will be approximately 20 feet. That's the 2 side yards balancing the 10-foot setbacks. One of the other relief for lot 1.01 will be maximum lot coverage. Again, I think this is where we were trying to balance off some of the building coverage and lot coverage. So the maximum lot coverage permitted based on the R4 standards is 85%. What is being proposed on lot 1.01 is 95%. So you're saying, well, why couldn't you just make the lot better? And I'll tell you why. When you look at a building coverage standpoint, one of the balancing tests that we looked at, which permits 60% coverage, we're actually at 50% coverage. So the building itself is reasonably sized for this proposed lot 1.01. It's just the added sidewalks and patio terrace areas that increase the impervious coverage. I also believe there's an entryway for some loading off of Cornelius, and so that's really part of the rationale for proposing the 95%. We would also say that we're not discounting the proposed lot, which I'll get into in a minute, but the proposed lot 1.01 actually has sufficient space to accommodate the park. The calculations for that in terms of building coverage and lot coverage are 33% building coverage, substantially below the 60%, and 56% lot coverage, substantially below the permitted 85%. So while we are very efficient with the existing Jones Hall structure, we do provide that added relief in terms of lot coverage and building coverage on proposed lot 1.01. Part of that is directly going to offset the impacts of added building coverage. The stormwater management design will address stormwater runoff with underground detention systems below the park area to address the newly and existing stormwater runoff, which will help mitigate the impacts of the added coverage. So there's, again, some thoughtful design and balancing between these two proposed lots. With respect to the maximum building height on, again, the existing Jones Hall, that structure is 211 feet, as we mentioned previously. The R4 only permits 110 feet, so clearly it predated the R4 limit on building height. Much of the testimony I'll give with respect to the proposed structure is about context. Clearly the existing Jones Hall has a context, it's a pre-existing condition, and that's really some of the basis for what we'll be discussing in terms of the proposed building height. There's no changes to the building height. There's no increases to the existing Jones Hall structure. One of the other nice attributes about this overall subdivision is that we're able to rebalance the parking and create some efficiency by including it in the proposed structure on lot 1.02. So it's a really efficient use of land by removing the surface parking, converting it to a park, and introducing the parking that will be made available to the existing Jones Hall structure in the proposed development. That's approximately 26 spaces, which will be transitioned, and it essentially is a minimum parking space variance, but the spaces will be real. They will be directly accessible for the existing Jones Hall senior housing, and they would comply, albeit not directly on the site. So there's no direct impact, and it's offset with the proposed structure. That's the relief needed for lot 1.01. On paper, in the tables, the highlights draw your attention to it, but I think my presentation tonight was a little bit of the rationale and some of the justifications from a planning standpoint. When we move to lot 1.02, that's where we're introducing the proposed multifamily multifamily building. First and foremost, you heard it at the top of the presentation. I think it was also referenced. We do require a D1 use variance. I'm offering that there's two components here. One, it's an inherently beneficial use with respect to the healthcare facility element to the proposed development, but I also think as a mixed-use development, it's still consistent with the R4 standards. So with respect to inherently beneficial uses, they basically have to promote and serve the general welfare of the community. The adjacent Jones Hall is a senior housing. I can't tell you exactly what type of facility or what services will be provided, but whether it's the Jones Hall's residents or residents in the surrounding area, healthcare is a priority for most people, whether they're young or old, and essentially that's a bona fide inherently beneficial use within the state of New Jersey. In other words, in a technical fashion, it presumptively meets the positive criteria. So notwithstanding that it's omitted from the permitted uses, it's recognized as an important use that can be considered under a D1 use standard. I do also want to say that the inclusion of the healthcare facility is included in the overall design of the building. It's not an outbuilding, but it is included in the overall design of the building. So there won't be any added demand on the existing, the proposed property. And again, I think much of it's going to fall back into the building mass that I'll get into a bit, but there's nothing that would draw its attention from a massing standpoint. I think that's a good segue to get into the building height D6 variance. So again, this is the zoning table. I covered one of the D variances in blue with respect to the permitted use, inherently beneficial medical facility. The D6, just in terms of numbers. And this is part of the thing. It's like, how could you propose such a large D variance? So what's permitted in the R4 is 110 feet. What's being proposed tonight is 214 feet. It's in excess of 104 feet. That's substantial. In the justification for a D6 variance, what this board's test is has there been an accommodation on a subject property to allow for added height, and is there a contextual basis in the neighborhood that would help put this proposed building height in sort of a consistent framework? And I think we've met both of them. It's unusual that you have a historic complex that has towers upwards of 23 stories. It's unusual. But when you have that setting and you're adjacent to those properties, what this application is presenting to you, that we are basically balancing that historic complex and introducing what I believe is actually a much more appropriate, historically sensitive solution, and also is better in terms of light and air and massing. So just to reiterate, the Beacon complex does have a range of building heights from 10 stories to 23 stories. The units of those structures are 42 units, upwards of 315 units. At one point, this application did have more units than what were permitted. We were roughly over 100 units. That was one of the aspects we wanted to take off the table. Remove a density variance, work within the permitted units that the zoning allows, and then we were still at what would be a very tall, slender structure that needed building height variance relief. So with that, the proposed building height is 17 stories. I think it's very easy to make the context argument because we're referencing the Beacon complex. In terms of site accommodation, we still provide sufficient setbacks from the existing Jones Hall structure. The minimum distance there is 20 feet. And we are set back on other property lines appropriately so. One of the and this is a little bit of the negative criteria. So I will hold on getting into the alternate massing, but I do think that this application does meet those two elements of a D6 justification, where we have site accommodation as well as a contextual basis for the proposed height. I thought we had an overall image of the heights that we calculated. I just wanted to thank you. So again, I'm not going to rehash all the building heights of each building, but as I mentioned, the range is upwards of 345 feet. And again, we're the same relative height as the Jones Hall structure, albeit just slightly higher as Montgomery rises going west. Those are the D variances. Obviously, there's more of a focus on D variances. They have a greater ability to impair any zoning. I'll get into the negative criteria with respect to that impairment. With respect to other bulk variances needed, the minimum lot size in the R4 is 60,000 square feet. What's being proposed is 28,301 square feet. That, in my opinion, is a sufficient lot size. Again, the objective from the design team is to balance the building footprints. The proposed building footprint is 9,438 square feet. That's the 33% number. So, in my opinion, the lot size is still substantial to accommodate a tower development. It's also able to accommodate a tower development with a 33% coverage, which is a good test. That 33% coverage allows for greater setbacks to adjacent properties. We are also able to efficiently locate the integrated parking, which is a really nice attribute of the overall project. Within the tower footprint, there will be 75 spaces, and I mentioned earlier the 26 spaces for the adjacent Jones Hall. It creates efficiency on the lot, which is a benefit. And again, that lot size, albeit smaller than the 60,000 square feet, I think is still sufficient and meets that benefits outweighing the detriments test. With respect to lot width, I mentioned earlier at the start of the presentation that we really balanced the distribution of the frontage along Montgomery. 300 feet is the minimum required. 119 feet is along Corneliuson Avenue. This is a through lot. I think you can also see it from this example. So this is a through lot on the proposed lot, 119 feet on Corneliuson and 126 feet along Montgomery. Substantial frontage to accommodate a tower. We're not trying to jam in or propose an overburdensome tower footprint within the narrow property. So I do think that the lot width is still appropriate And again, the overall building height in terms of massing on the property, you saw the shadow study that was prepared. We have very little impacts because we provide greater setbacks with that efficient building footprint. With respect to the setbacks, the front yard minimum is 10 feet where 0 feet is proposed. This is along Montgomery and is in connection with the parking levels, which are actually below the street grade, but we're referencing this out of an abundance of caution. So the mixed-use building around the perimeter will have a 10-foot setback at street level. And that meets the side yard, the front yard requirements. With respect to the rear yard, again, this is a through lot, so the rear yard, and it's an irregular through lot. Obviously, the initial existing parcel has a bit of an L shape, so the rear lot setback is required to be 25 feet in the R1. What's being proposed at the parking base is a 0-foot setback in the rear. And then at the residential floors, again, we are setting back that necessary 25 feet. So from a building mass standpoint, above the parking levels, we would be in compliance. The other two design aspects in terms of relief needed are with respect to forestry standards. One variance along Montgomery. Montgomery is a narrow sidewalk. It's dealing with grade. It has an existing retaining wall. 5 street trees are required where we're not able to provide the street trees. We are also requesting relief along Corneliuson, where 9 street trees are required, but we're able to provide 6. Again, there's a little bit more access along Corneliuson that prevents the additional 3 street trees. The forestry standards does allow for their donation. We will be making that, so we'll be in compliance with providing the appropriate in lieu contribution. I did want to take some time to talk about special reasons. We're dealing with the D1 use variance, which I do think is a little minor in terms of it being a permitted use at this current time with the new zoning, but really about the D6 variance. In terms of special reasons, I think first and foremost with the healthcare facility, the positive criteria is met, but I do think that the granting of the use variance to allow for the healthcare facility will promote the public safety, general welfare, and that's consistent with Purpose A. I do think it will provide a much added resource for the neighborhood. With respect to an establishment of appropriate population density, we are in the R4. One of the goals and changes of this project was to respect the density. So the proposed Lot 1.02 is compliant with the number of units that could be generated on that land. And I think that, to me, is a good signal of appropriate balance for the proposed development, and that's meeting the special reasons of Purpose E of the land use law. And lastly, I do think this is a really creative, respectful architecture design. The design team, 2018, that's almost 7 years of a process through design, consultations with the city, different healthcare professional, different historic professionals. I'm not a historic professional, so I do rely on a lot of the design intent with the proposed facades. But what I can tell you is that this application, the proposed building, does balance the context of the overall Beacon facility with a new building that will be created. I do believe that all the changes made to change the shape and slender, the narrowness of the proposed structure, the bar shapes that Mr. Garber referenced, the vertical elements of the facade, I do all think that comes into play, and I think it furthers Purpose I to promote and establish an attractive building to improve the streetscape and to promote the desirable visual environment. That's essentially my testimony with respect to the positive criteria. With respect to the negative criteria, D1 use variances, the phrases have a greater burden to impair the zoning. The easy aspect about this presentation is that the zoning was changed, and if we were making the application today, a healthcare facility would be a bona fide permitted use. I think that's the easiest way to address that there's no impairment. But I do also think that there will be the healthcare facility in this neighborhood, which is a very active neighborhood along Montgomery with multiple uses. The R4 zone permits multiple uses. It's not strictly a residential use. I do think it would be an appropriate addition with the relief being a use variance. With respect to the building height, one of the things that I wanted to just reiterate, and I'm doing my best not to repeat Mr. Garber's presentation because I do think he covered a lot of the analysis and design intent, but we did try and ask ourselves, well, if our goal was still to utilize some of the latent availability of land on this overall site to preserve the Jones Hall with the subdivision, what would a reasonable development by the R4 standards look like? It's not pretty. It's a proposed subdivision. This board still has to grant it, but essentially what we're proposing here is a minimum of 8 stories, a maximum of 11, a permitted building height of 110 feet, the required setbacks, and Mr. Garber and I went back and forth on the appropriate zoning that would be taken here. We increased the rear yard point to the necessary requirement, and ultimately through this analysis what we found was that the generation of an as-of-right structure on proposed lot 1.02 would yield a gross square footage of 184,000 square feet. What's proposed in the more efficient tower design is 182,000 square feet, just shy of 2,000 less. I think that's another testament to why this proposed alternative in a tower design is not only more consistent with the Beacon complex, but it's also more efficient and yields more benefits in terms of an appropriate building mass, providing more light and air to the neighbors, more consistent in terms of the vertical nature and aesthetics of the overall Beacon complex. And ultimately, I do think that it's a better massing for the property. We are also able to better utilize the land at grade for the park for the existing Jones Hall and the future residents, and also introduce the integrated parking. I think that references much of the impacts. One other addition I think that was raised up relatively recently was the incorporation of a bus stop. We heard from Mr. Chevette that will be further designed. And again, that's just furthering the ability for this project to provide more on-demand direct access to mass transit. I think that was an impact that was raised by transportation planning and city planning. Sorry, let me just, I don't know what stopped working, but it might just, I wanted to end on the last slide. So these were some of the other contexts of the comparisons. Again, happy to answer questions on the massing, but what we think is being proposed is a better design alternative. And this view, I think, is telling because of how harmonious the proposed tower will be in the overall complex. The R4 district permits high-rise apartment buildings. What's being proposed is a high-rise apartment building, albeit taller. I think it's consistent with the Beacon complex and neighborhood, and will be a good addition, not only for residents that can occupy it soon, but for residents in generations to come within this neighborhood. I think that's my direct testimony. I think I covered everything I wanted to, so I'll be here for any questions.
We'll hold our questions to the end. Thank you. Okay, at this time we will have public comment. So anyone who would like to speak can please come to the microphone. Bridget, do you need another break or you're okay? Okay. Please come to the microphone. You'll have to state your name, spell your name, and I believe provide your address. So whomever wants to come, you want to line up, it's okay. And at this time, timekeeper will be Commissioner Barron. You'll have 3 minutes. He will let you know when you have a minute left. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
You can raise your right hand if you swear. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And everyone state and spell your full name and provide your address.
My name is Veronica Stein,
I'll tell her.
Veronika, last name Stein. My address is 4 Beacon Way.
After her.
I need to, oh, okay. Can you hear?
Yes.
Sorry. So did you get my name and my address? Okay. I want to thank the presenters, especially Mr. Garber, for your careful attention to so many adjustments so that the building itself better complements the Beacon building as a historical Art Deco building. However, the architectural complex includes not only buildings themselves, but also their specific layout, planned green spaces, and designed community gathering areas. Introducing an 18-story structure in such close proximity would alter that feeling that is laid out throughout all the other buildings if you look at the Beacon as a whole, the way it was as the former Jersey City Medical Center. Those open spaces, the green spaces, are a very important aspect of the design. And the property that is being talked about for this 18-story building was not intended as a vacant lot to be built on at some time in the future, but it was one of those green spaces. And I think it helps us to understand why there is pushback about having this building, because it is truly a green space. And as I listened to the engineer talk about the different places where you're going to try and put in green spaces, it's sort of off in a corner. It's not an integral part of where that Jones Hall building is. And I think that's what makes this an uncomfortable building to add into this section, even if it could be a wonderful addition to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, if we can just, I see that we have Councilman Gilmore is here, and I would like to offer him the time to speak.
Thank you, I appreciate
And if you would just raise your right hand.
it. Yes.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And your full name.
Frank Gilmore. Yes, I just have just like a few logistical questions. I know recently this project came before this board in or around 18 months, 2 years ago or something like that, and we referred it to historic for, I guess, recommendations or something like that. If someone can just explain how that process looked when we typically refer to historic and then it comes back, what if anything happens? How does that process look?
Sure. So staff wrote a referral memo ahead of originally scheduling that item before the zoning board. And when the applicant received that memo, they asked to forego organizing a zoning board adjustment meeting and to just go and visit the HPC with their application to seek a recommendation before returning to this board. They had 3 meetings before the HPC over several months. And at the beginning, in the opening statement from Council Porter, the applicant She went over the fact that the recommendation was ultimately a denial. However, there was historic preservation staff that did recommend approval of the application in its current form.
Oh, so the board as a whole recommended against it, but
The board, not as a whole. It was a split vote on denial.
Okay, so what was the number, if you know?
On a motion to recommend for approval, it was a vote of 3 for and 5 against. And on a motion to not recommend approval, it was 6 for and 2 against.
Okay, so typically that board is not really a final decision, it's just their recommendation.
In this case, it's because this item it's not a locally designated landmark. It's not in a local historic district, so it wouldn't regularly go to the Historic Preservation Commission, but for on referral because it's in the master plan for Jersey City.
Okay, thank you for that insight. So yeah, I mean, I just think, and thank you to the presenters for presenting so eloquently. I just think, given the proximity in the mass of the building, it just doesn't feel like a good fit for that area. So at this juncture, is the board tonight is hearing the proposal to move forward for this to go to the next step, correct? That's what this
board would vote it up or down tonight, yes. And then if it's they have the majority of the votes to go forward, then the project would go forward.
Okay, so I just want to, and I know I get the rap sometimes, these us guys anti-development or whatever, but I just want to, voice my concerns for the record that I just think that with all going on in that area with the senior home and everything, I just think that a 18-story building right there in that space it just throws the fabric of the community off. I don't think it's in the best interest of us as a city to have that type of dwelling. I think we really need to be focusing on trying to have as much green space as possible, especially you guys hear these you're at these meetings all the time and you see the development in Jersey City have went and we really need to consider saving some areas for green space, and I think this is an opportunity we have to do that. I know the community have been, since the start of the conversation, they have been extremely opposed to this project. So I just wanted to come here and voice my concern and have that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Hello.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. My name is Brent Gardner, B-R-E-N-T, G-A-R-E-N-T, Gardner, G-A-R-D-N-E-R.
And your address?
4 Beacon Way.
I'm sorry?
4 Beacon Way.
Just keep your voice up.
Will do. Thank you. Sorry, I've never done this before.
Okay,
so.
Just speak into the mic so we can
Thank
hear you. You can even turn it up closer if you have to. Just bend it forward.
It's flexible.
Bend it up. That's it.
Is that better?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to, well, now it got loud.
Good. We can hear you.
All right, so I wanted to touch on a couple of things. Firstly, I didn't bring an attorney or 100 slides, so I'm going to try to keep it under 3 minutes. And I also haven't been involved with this since 2018, but one of the things that I was looking at the legal notice that was provided, and I just wanted to touch base and just sort of reiterate exactly what it is they're asking of you and of this for this project. Specifically, all of the variances. Like it's a little concerning. I understand. Mr. Garber said that that careful consideration was given, that they edited the building down, and yet there's still significant variances that are needed to make this project happen in the way that they want it to do. And just to reiterate, I mean, the medical use portion, I understand that they've rezoned it, but as I understand from what I'm hearing tonight, that they have to work with the zoning that they had at the time that they started the project. But just the additional traffic for that is something that is of concern. And also the height requirement. I mean, I think Mr. Haight said it was going to be over 100 feet higher than the zoning, than the current zoning requirements. And then the minimum lot area of 28,000 square feet, where 60,000 square feet is required. That's double. And the setbacks of 10 feet on every side. I mean, I'm 6 feet. Like, that's not a lot. It's not a lot of space. It just feels like they're overbuilding on this tiny little lot here. And again, I understand, like Mr. Haight said, he called it a creative and respectful design, and it is. I think it's actually a kind of a cool building. I'm not sure that I agree that it absolutely fits in to the other buildings. They said they have to mimic the Deco style. Okay, but it's not the Deco style. It's new design. But for such a creative and respectful design, I think it should be on a lot where they don't have to get several zoning variances in order to accomplish what it is that they want to accomplish. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening to the board.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. My name is Sandhya Patangay, Patangay. I'm the resident. Yes, Sandhya. 4 Beacon Way, 1609 is the unit. So I just wanted to appreciate that the presentation was great. The building design absolutely looked great.
Please speak into the mic so we can hear you.
Sure.
Okay.
Can you hear you now?
Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank all the presenters. It was great to see this building coming. But my only concern is its location and the structural risk it's going to cause to the building where I live, and I call it a home. Especially when we talk about this kind of a large-scale construction, we also have to think about the serious risk this would cause to the buildings with the deep excavations, the vibration that it would cause, which will threaten the structural integrity of this landmark. The biggest one that really feared me in today's proposal was the proximity, 10 feet. I'm almost close to 6 feet. I'm so worried that 4 feet away of my height, I would have this huge building standing right there. So the close proximity, which is usually also not allowed by the zoning, is going to increase the risk. And the people who might have visited or know the Beacon Towers, they are almost 100 years old, and they have interconnecting internal underground passages. So it's not just the outside, the exterior part of the building that's going to get affected, but also they are, under the ground structures will also be impacted by this proposal. So I think we as the board, the residents of Jersey City who have honor of having this historic building in our neighborhood, I think we should try to protect these buildings because these towers are irreplaceable structures, and I think this should be a top priority to make sure that these new beautiful buildings should not come and affect our history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear that I'll be giving my testimony with the whole truth. My name is Manisha, spelled as Manisha. My last name is a bit big, Brahmachari, Brahmachary. I live in 4 Beacon Way, apartment 709. So what I wanted to say is that this is my first home that I've ever bought, and I'm really thrilled that I live in a landmark, a historical landmark. How many people can say that? No, not many people. That too in a city which is so close to New York City. What I wanted to say here is that Beacon, as my neighbor said, is a very old structure, which is almost a century old. And it was originally designed for a different reason. It was a hospital. And the surrounding water, sewer, and the electric systems are really not intended to support the modern, high-density, mixed-use buildings. This new development, which although is very impressive and looks great, the overload that the combined sewer and stormwater systems increasing the risk of sewage backups and localized flooding, especially since the site is downhill, and to collect the runoffs from higher elevation. I think one of the people presenting said that all the utilities are going to be off Cornelissen, the sewer and everything else, and that is the down slope where everything accumulates. We personally, even now, have seen that when there is heavy rains, and it happened, there's a lot of waterlogging and flooding that happens there. It literally, you have to take a boat instead of anything else to basically commute there, and it takes many days for that water to be cleared off. And having an additional building is just going to increase that problem, and I can guarantee you that 100%. So again, water pressure problems are already there for existing residents, many of whom have already reported low water pressure and brown water after heavy rains. And including or the construction of this new building is just going to increase that problem as well. Not to mention the stress on the power grid.
You have 1 minute.
Sure. Not to mention the stress on the power grid, which is already prone to outages during peak summer months, as dozens of new units add simultaneous heating and cooling and appliance demand. And there is no comprehensive infrastructure resiliency study that I have seen today that has been conducted to show that the current systems can accommodate this current increase in the overload of structures. And another thing to be mentioned is that there is, of course, they are just 32 feet away from the Beacon site, as was mentioned today. The potential foundation damage to historic buildings may result from both runoff saturation and vibrations caused by pile driving or excavation. That's all I wanted to say. I would love to keep living in this place and not live in a very congested place where you're just looking at people who are very stressed out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. My name is Kumarika, Kumarika, Banerjee, B as in boy, Anerjee, and I live at 4 Beacon Way. I would like to just tag on to some of the things that my neighbors have previously brought up, but particularly speaking to the impact on the community's character and the significant increase in traffic that will be brought to this area. The proposed building scale and massive footprint would significantly cause congestion to this area. The developers have previously submitted a traffic study, which I reviewed somewhat, and on the very beginning of it, they say the existing road conditions, and they describe Montgomery Street as a two-way roadway that provides travel 2 lanes in each direction. This is not correct. Montgomery currently has 1 lane of traffic in each direction. So this study is outdated. Their traffic study is invalid. I don't know if they didn't physically visit the place to do the study, or if it was done pre-current conditions. So in addition to that, I would like to say that, they're proposing a medical facility. I'm a physician myself. I have worked in a number of a variety of medical facilities, and they are not really taking into account this added traffic that this would bring. Medical facilities include medical staff, patients, delivery drivers. Patients don't just arrive using public transport. They are often using assistive devices, wheelchairs, walkers, you know, they have family members and escorts that need to bring them and take them back. This additional traffic and the entrance to the medical facility is directly on Montgomery.
You have 1 minute.
The point here is that, you know, these cars are going to double park right there in that one lane of traffic to drop off patients, to pick up patients. They have not made any accommodations for parking for any of the staff, all the doctors, nurses, physician's assistants, techs. You know, where are they going to park? Are they going to ride up on their bicycles? And, you know, the patients that are going to get delivered, they're all going to dropped off. They're going to be double parking on that one road, clogging the entire street, which is a major artery for emergency vehicles, EMS, you know, in and out of that area. So that is what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Freud. It's Freud. And I live in 4 Beacon Way. Sure. So I live in 4 Beacon Way, and I call Beacon my home, and I moved many times, and I love at home. So I'm deeply concerned about the risk that our proposed construction that exceeds the footprints, the size, the length, the closeness would be posing to our homes. And because large and modern high-rise that is very close to historical buildings like ours is not just out of character for historical building and for the complex that we live in, it is also very dangerous. The proposal to exceed current zoning limits for both size overall and height, almost 100%, is really maximizing potential profit for new construction, maximizing how much can be built on that small space, but it also increases risk to what already exists, and that is a part of American history. The landmark like we have is really, really rare. So, Historical Preservation Commission that had reviewed that demand also reviewed that proposal, voted multiple times, and didn't recommend it. And we believe that speaks volume that comes in from specialists, and Historical Preservation Committee was created for a reason. So we live here, we really care about our community, and we really pledge and ask you to carefully examine this case, and please ask for additional assessment of risks on a much deeper level to see how it would really impact the historical complex that we all live in, and we hope that it will protect Jersey City heritage. Thank you.
Thank you.
The testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. My name is Christina Noonan. It's Christina. Last name is Noonan. I live at 4 Beacon Way, another one of my neighbors. Thank you for your time. I know this has been a very long day for everyone. We've spent a lot of time talking about looking at plans of like 1 block radius, and we're all talking about the building. I want to talk about the context of that building for a few minutes. First of all, despite the high residential density, the area remains underserved for a lot of amenities. There is no full-service grocery store nearby. I still go to Whole Foods downtown to get my groceries. There's minimal retail and pharmacy options, and there's no pedestrian-friendly retail corridor. The development does not address these deficits and will only increase demand on what's already limited resources for our community. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the pressure on public transit in the schools. The nearest path station, I noticed in the presentation, was mentioned 15 minutes away. I just made that commute this morning, actually, from the Beacon. I'm a triathlete. It was more than 15 minutes. It was closer to 20 for a healthy adult. If I was older, it might be a little bit longer as well. So it's a significant commute, especially if you're thinking about going and coming back. 20 to 25 minutes, I would assume. The local schools and recreation facilities are also limited and currently strained as well. We talked about reducing green space already, so I won't go into that. But the proposal makes no contribution to supporting or enhancing these public services. I think overall, one thing that I just want to communicate is that I'm open to development on the site, but I'd like for it to be responsible and reflect the impacts, reflect the livelihood and impacts for the neighbors around, for over thousands of residents that are, as people have mentioned, feet away from us. And I really appreciate your time and consideration into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. My name is Crystal Potts. I reside at 4 Beacon Way. Okay. CRYSTALPOTTS. First of all, I want to say I'm not a politician. I'm just a resident, and I'm not going to be politically correct. I want to say, first of all, I think that presentation was a lot of fluff. It was 119 pages, and that 119 pages consisted of some things that Robert said one page was inaccurate. And I think for him to come before you with 119 pages, there was no need for that. I think it could have been condensed to maybe 25 to maybe 50 pages, but 119 pages. I think you can put lipstick on a pig, still a pig, and I think that's what that presentation was. I'm not opposed to development. I think growth is important. You know, I've lived at the Beacon for 18 years, and we all want our property values to increase. You know, I heard one person say it was a 17-story development. I heard another person say 18-story. Now, that's what they're saying, 17 and 18. I think that they threw 119 pages at you because they don't want you to really look at what's underneath the hood. They just want you to go ahead and approve this mess. And I don't want to go through all of the other particulars because a lot of my neighbors, and I call them neighbors, but they're really my family. And people that I call my family, some family members I don't speak to sometimes, but again, when we get into something happens to a family member, I'm going to stand there toe-to-toe, head-to-head, and I'm going to support them. And that's what I'm here doing tonight, supporting my family. And my family is Jersey City and seeing what's going on. Now, they're talking about variances, you know, and exemptions. That's a problem. And it's a problem they shouldn't
You
be
have
doing.
1 minute.
Shouldn't be doing that. You know, they're talking about granting exemptions. You on the zoning board, you're residents just like us. You are here, you care about the community. You've been appointed by elected officials that we have voted for. And we're hoping that you will look at what they've put before you and say, no, this doesn't work. Let them go back and come back with something that is appropriate for the community. Because what they've come back with for you is not appropriate for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. I'm Robert Stein. I live at the Beacon also. There are several things I would like to say. I think the presentation was very optimistic about this new building. It is huge numbers of variances. It basically amounts to asking so many variances that there may as well not be a zoning law. I mean, everything in the zoning law is being asked to be turned over.
Use your mic.
I'm sorry. So that's
to my way of thinking, a bad thing. They have presented this traffic study, which it was pointed out, it seems to think that Montgomery is a 4-lane traffic street, which it is not. And it's a key emergency route. I see fire engines, ambulances up and down it frequently, and it's one of the best ways to get from down below up the hill. So the idea that they would not take that into account is too bad. The traffic study also did not mention the fact that the Roxy, which is another building of the Beacon complex, has just opened and is renting to new tenants, and they will generate traffic. The fact that there's no shopping in the area means that everybody who wants to buy groceries or whatever is not likely to walk there. So they're going to be either driving or calling an Uber or whatever. So you're going to have all the delivery vehicles, the FedExes, the Amazons, all of that stuff. There already has been a major increase in congestion, and it will get worse. So I think that's important to take into account. I'm surprised that the traffic study didn't mention it. There are other things. When the Historical Preservation Commission looked it over,
You have 1 minute.
they had a lot of sympathy for the design, which was modified several times. The reason they voted it down as a recommendation was not because of the design, which is what Mr. Garber spent all his time on. It was because it's fundamentally too big to shoehorn into the historically preserved space. And that was what they felt. So it's not a problem with the building itself. It's just too big for its place. And that's why I hope you will heed their recommendation and turn this down. I would like to say that you're pretty much bound to follow the zoning principles unless there's an extremely good reason not to. In this case, there is no really good reason not to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
Raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely. My name is Patrick Kelleher. I'm the Hudson County Building Trades President. I represent all the thousands of members in Hudson County and Jersey City residents. Kelleher, Kelleher.
And your address?
My address is 74 Roxbury Road, Dumont, New Jersey. But I'm 90% of the time in Jersey City. I represent all the trades in Hudson County. I absolutely had a opportunity to work on parts of the buildings of the Beacon. I seen the design tonight. I've seen it early renditions and stuff like that. I was speaking with the developer and the team here, and with organized labor, we build it safe, on time. The project is within the barriers of what they're looking to do there, and the conversation is it's a building that can be built with organized labor, and it's built safe and on time. Thank you.
Anyone else from the community to speak?
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. My name is Chris Perez, P-E-R-E-Z. Good evening, everybody. So this evening I'm speaking on behalf of our board at the Jersey City Landmarks Conservancy. The Conservancy participated in the number of meetings before the Historic Preservation Commission, and we did object to this project. Historic preservation is not just about architecture, but it's also about the placement of the buildings. The existing historic buildings on this site were intentionally put in their locations, and this proposed building will disrupt the cadence and rhythm of those buildings forever. If I do recall during those HPC meetings that we had this hypothetical that since the campus was built over time, if another building were to be placed on the campus, where would they put it? And I think that was here nor there, but we don't believe it would be in this location. So we ask that this board deny this application because it will forever disrupt the look and feel of the historic medical center. The real question tonight remains, has the applicant made a compelling case that this site, in the midst of the original historic former Jersey City Medical Center, is the site particularly suited for and warranting relief from the zoning rules, including all the C variances and especially the 2 D variances being asked for? Do the benefits of the application outweigh the detriments created by the application? We don't believe so. We ask that you uphold the Historic Preservation Commission's recommendations to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the community? Okay, then I will close out the public portion of this meeting. Commissioners, do we have questions? I don't know. Do you want to give it?
We can. I mean, I think
We can, but 10 o'clock I'm shutting this down and we won't be voting.
I think the traffic report was done, I'm going to say before the mayor put in bike lanes, but we could hear it.
But that, okay.
Do you have an updated traffic report, or?
We do, and
Then it's important to hear it.
Yeah.
If it's
if
updated, because everyone's referring
If
to an
it's
old
the same
report.
one that they're talking about that was incorrect and
there was
showing
an
Montgomery.
initial study that was done back in before COVID, back in 2019, at the very origin of the site, and then there was an updated study that was produced in 2024.
Okay, so that's the recent one.
Yeah.
Then we need to hear it as brief as.
Yeah, so I
if that's
think it would be helpful if we have our traffic consultant address that, particularly
that came
since there
up.
were 4 comments that were raised that alluded to traffic. So I think it's very important that we hear from our traffic consultant.
Okay, and I'm going to let this gentleman, you have a comment?
The place I took those comments was from the traffic study attached to this particular application, and it was dated October 2024.
Okay, thank you.
And your name again, sir?
Robert Stein.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. My name is Connor Hughes, C-O-N-N-O-R, last name H-U-G-H-E-S.
What are his credentials?
Not sure if Mr. Hughes has been before this.
No.
I've been before the planning board as recently as last week, but never before the zoning board,
So
so.
why don't you just put some,
Great. So, Mr. Hughes,
Yeah.
if you could please provide your background and education for the benefit of the board.
Certainly. So I'm a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, licenses in good current standing. As I just mentioned, has been accepted as an expert witness in traffic engineering, specifically in front of the Jersey. My apologies. Been accepted as an expert witness in traffic engineering, specifically before the Jersey City Zoning or Planning Board, along with over about 40 other municipalities throughout northern New Jersey.
great, that's fine. We'll accept your
Thank you.
credentials. Thank you.
So just to head off the comment about the 1 lane versus the 2 lane, mentioned about Montgomery Street, our most recent traffic study dated October 30th, 2024, does mistakenly categorize Montgomery Street as a 2-lane roadway. It was an oversight and a holdover from our original 2018 to 2019 timeframe when we originally conducted that traffic study, when it was 2 lanes in each direction. So just on the record, we absolutely acknowledge that it is a 1-lane roadway for vehicles. There's bike lanes. So again, it was initially referenced as a 2-lane, but we do acknowledge that it's currently now a 1-lane roadway. And just to go over the findings and the the preparation of our report. No problem.
Yes.
Is my time up? Sure. So to review the findings of our report, so the first process of establishing our report is establishing our existing conditions, our existing traffic volumes, and analyzing the existing conditions. And the way that we analyze our existing volumes as we go out and we conduct physical traffic counts at adjacent intersections near the site. Specifically in this case, we conducted traffic counts during the weekday morning peak hour, specifically from 7 to 9 a.m., as well as the weekday afternoon peak hour, specifically from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. And we did these on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, so just under a year ago. Now, we selected those peak hour times based on the particular use, based on the peak times associated with residential and medical and senior housing use. For the most part, people are coming and going during those peak times. So that would essentially recognize as a worst case condition as far as the traffic volumes would go. And then what we do is when we have those 2 hours of counts, we isolate the highest single hour of volume during those 2 hours and use that as the basis of our traffic analysis. So when we analyze our existing conditions, that's how we incorporate that. The next part of that is to look into the future conditions, of course. The first step of that is establishing a baseline future condition first without any additional site traffic for the proposed development. That's what we call our no-build condition. What we do for that is we look at New Jersey DOT published background growth rates. This is based on the area that the site is located in, the roadways that it's located on. So they publish certain yearly growth rates based on these factors for us to reference and gauge that future traffic. So based on that reference, we applied a growth of 2.25% per year for a period of 2 years, which is our projected completion date for that building. And once we have that baseline future condition established, we then project our future site traffic for the specific development. And for that, we reference a publication called ITE Trip Generation. This is a source that's used widely by probably all traffic engineers. It's very widely accepted as essentially the gold standard of projecting traffic volumes and trip generation. It's based on empirical studies that they conduct at various sites across the country, and they establish average trip rates based on different variables, square footage, number of units, based on these counts that they conduct at these various sites. And they come up with an average trip generation rate based on this research that is published and that we are able to reference when projecting our future site traffic. So based on the number of residential units being proposed, based on the medical space being proposed, about 98 residential units and about between 7,000 to 7,500 square feet of medical space. Those projections calculate in the morning peak hour a total of 43 new trips, and in the afternoon peak hour a total of 46 trips between the residential and the medical portion. And again, that's a total number of trips that includes both inbound and outbound, so that's not to say that that's 43 new cars or 43 different cars. It concludes both in and out movements based on that number. And then, of course, you have the senior living facility, which is existing to remain, so there's no additional site traffic associated with that particular part of the use. So, again, 43 trips during the morning peak hour, 46 in the afternoon. I will note that the data we use for medical office space is based on a more suburban data. So we feel that could be a little bit conservative based on the fact that we are obviously located in a more urbanized area. And that total number also does account for trips such as deliveries, Amazon, UPS, anything like that would be incorporated into that total number along with the residential, the actual residents. So just wanted to point that out as well. And just to put those numbers into perspective, New Jersey DOT establishes what they consider to be a significant increase in traffic of 100 or more new trips in any peak hour. As I mentioned, we're at a maximum of 46 new trips, so we're just less than half of that threshold. And that ITE reference that I mentioned for trip generation, They also set a threshold of 50 trips where they state that a traffic impact study should be considered. So we're right around that number as well. And we did, of course, conduct this full study, irregardless of the fact that we do fall below that recommendation. And of course, there's other infrastructure that lead to alternate modes of travel other than vehicles. Obviously, there's mass transit availability. The Journal Square Path Station, although about a 3/4 mile away, will potentially attract some residents to that based on that feature. You have the bus stop right in front of the site, along with others around the area, that can help get residents and medical patients to and from without having to use their personal vehicles. And there's obviously infrastructure for bike lanes, sidewalks for walkability, bikeability. We're providing bike spaces within the building to help promote sort of that alternate transportation, just to help reduce that vehicle demand. So there's a lot of factors at play that will help to reduce that vehicle demand and help alleviate that congestion that's being experienced. And the way that we reference the operations of the intersection, we look at what's called a level of service. Essentially, this is a letter grade from A through F that we use to grade the operation of the intersections that we looked at. In this case, Corneliuson Avenue and Bright Street, as well as Corneliuson Avenue and Florence Street on the other side of the Montgomery Avenue overpass. And what we find when we compare the no-build conditions in the future without the site traffic, and then look at the future conditions with the site traffic, we find that there's no change in the levels of service. The highest level of service was a level of service D, which again is with or without the addition of the site traffic. So this isn't to say that there will be no impact, because any development is going to have some sort of impact. But really what this tells us is that those impacts will be minimal. And based on the fact that we're below that significant increase threshold, that tells us that the increase in traffic will not cause what I'll say a discernible difference in the traffic operations surrounding the site. And then getting into the parking, as you heard from our prior testimony, there is a variance for the location of the parking for the Jones Hall for the senior housing development, but we do meet the number of required spaces. So for the residential portion with 98 units, half of the space per unit is required. We're providing the 49 spaces to meet that requirement. And then for the senior housing, there are 20 spaces required. We're providing 26. Granted, it is technically off-site from where the actual senior housing is, but it's right next door in the garage. It's not across the street or somewhere else in the area that they would have to otherwise walk to. It's essentially the same. It's still next to the building as it is today. And then related to the medical space, the ordinance does not require any parking spaces for a medical office space of this size. Obviously, we recognize that there's still, regardless of that requirement or lack of requirement, that there will be some vehicle demand associated with that. But the fact that there is no parking requirement, this is typical of urban environments. And there is enough spaces to accommodate both the residential, the senior housing, as well as any medical space traffic. And I draw that conclusion because when we look at the census data for vehicle ownership in this particular census tract, we find that on average there's about 0.4 vehicles per unit, per rental unit, and that equates to 39 parking spaces based on our 98 units that are being proposed. And when you include the 26 spaces being proposed for the senior housing development, that gets us to 65. We're providing 75. So that 10 extra spaces can help to accommodate any of that vehicular demand associated with the medical office space. And other factors as well, it is likely that the medical office is to a degree going to serve residents of the building, the existing senior housing development, and there is some street parking availability along Montgomery, along the other side of Corneliuson. Obviously, it's subject to availability, but it is there to be utilized as needed. And as referenced during the architectural testimony, there is a designated space on site for the ambulance, as well as 2 drop-off and pickup spaces to help accommodate either the medical office, the senior housing development, or any other drop-off and pickup activity that might be needed for the site. So with that, I'll just conclude that, on the basis of our study, that's based on all of the general standards that are set forth, we feel that the proposed development, again, is not going to generate a significant increase to the point where there will be a discernible impact on the existing operations, and that's based on the number of trips that I went through. And we do feel comfortable that the parking availability, along with those other factors of being in an urban environment and having that accessibility and ability to utilize other modes of transportation, that the parking will be sufficient. So if there's any further questions, I'm happy to oblige.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, commissioners, do you have any questions for anyone?
I have one question. Just, and the question really is to clarify, because you did acknowledge that there was a error in.
Yes.
That being said, was the study that you did, though, on county cars, that was done with the current, obviously the current situation on Montgomery Street as it is, being at one way in each direction.
Right.
All
That's
right.
correct.
So even though that was an error on paper, this study, this most recent study, was done with on the Montgomery Street being on the conditions it is right now, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Second thing is, I just want to make sure this from the plan that all the entrance to all the parking in and out and everything else is on Cornelison Avenue, not on Montgomery Street, correct?
Yes, that's
There's
also correct.
no cars, nothing going out.
No,
Just
there's
wanna-
no vehicle traffic
All right.
directly entering or exiting to Montgomery.
Okay, all right. That's my question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, commissioners, I open the floor if anybody has any questions.
I have a question about the medical facility.
Sure.
Is it urgent care? Is it just for x-rays? Is it like a mini emergency room?
To this point, we don't have an occupant for that space, so we don't know the specific operations. But obviously, I'm sure the applicant and the owner will be sensitive to the fact that there is, some parking concerns to that nature.
Well,
so.
urgent care would create more traffic than just x-rays, obviously.
Yeah, so, I think it's a very good question. And so,
Of course it is.
while we don't have a tenant currently, I can tell you that there's been outreach to many of the community health organizations in town.
Like Barnabas and stuff?
Not like Barnabas, like Horizon, for instance,
Oh,
was
okay.
one, right? So these are community-based organizations that deal with, for instance, female reproductive health. So that, there was a previous iteration where we had a lot more medical space, and there was some concern that you could have something like a surgical center or something. That is, I don't believe that that's what's intended here. We're really talking about community medical, and we do think that in speaking with, for instance, Horizon, that a lot of the traffic that they get is indeed foot traffic. And so we really imagined that it would be a use consistent with that, and that's something that the owner has been diligently trying to find a tenant.
Can we get any assurances on that? Because the other thing I have a question about is that you mentioned the gym, and that this was going to also be used by the health facility, as well as the residents. And I took down your words. And is this going to be a therapy facility or something? Because that would be in and out all the time.
Let me clarify that. What I said was there was a gym on the second floor
Yes, you did.
that would be used for both the tenants of the building, residents of the building, as well as residents of Jones Hall. There is a small facility that would be planned on the ground floor that would be specific to the medical use. They're split. We can't have patients in the same gym as the residents. That wouldn't be that wouldn't really work on a number of levels.
So would any part of that be considered a facility for therapy?
No, I think the owner is willing to, the owner would be willing to work with the board pending a vote that we would make sure that we could limit the medical use to ensure it's one that was primarily foot traffic and not
condition.
Yeah, that could be a condition. That would be fine.
My other concern too, going about the parking. 98 units, 49 spaces for residents. Again, the question, and I know that one of the community and people asked this question: where are the doctors, the receptionists, the patients, the anyone who works, the staff, going to park?
Yeah.
I mean, you're giving 49 units over to the senior housing. Who's parking in those spots? Okay, I don't imagine a lot of those seniors will be driving, and they have staff over there, so those spots are going to be taken by the staff assigned to that facility. So I'm just concerned about where are all these people going to park?
I think that that's a fair question also. So first I want to reiterate all the traffic is going through Corneliuson. We have been asked to comply with the lack of parking in Jones Hall right now, and we've built that number of units into our parking garage as shown. Right, so we have a 75 total. I can tell you anecdotally that there really is very, very limited cars for the seniors, and so you're right, it's staff. And I can probably tell you the amount of staff if you let me ask the owner. But the amount of staff that is in Jones Hall with these seniors is a relatively small amount, and we think that we will actually have an abundance of parking. As Connor suggested, that would be used for medical staff and the community folks that would be working in the medical use on the first floor.
Okay, but there are no assurances about that.
Well, we could, I mean...
So my other thing is, so if there's 49 parking spaces for residents, and now patients start to come in, or the staff starts to park there, and they're not out by the time the residents come home. So now they have to start looking around for space. So you still have that, because we don't even know what the hours of this medical facility might be. Because you don't know what the medical facility is going to be.
Yeah, just 1 second, please, and
Okay.
we're happy to get this right.
I'm sorry, we closed out the public portion, okay?
Thank you.
So there's 23 total, from my understanding, existing between staff and residents that are currently parking that would then continue to park in the new garage. So we're providing, so 23 now, 23 proposed. Sorry.
Before it was said that there's 49 spaces for the residents in the 98-unit building.
I'm talking for the existing demand for the senior development. We just understood that there's a total of 23 cars that are parked for the senior development. So those 23 cars will be encompassed in the 26 that are being proposed in the new garage, and then there's 49 additional new spaces that will be for the new residential units.
So the medical department, the staff will not be permitted to park there at all.
I think they will, and the fact that the shared parking will allow that to happen in the sense that, yes, while we do not know the exact hours, that is something that can be managed. And based on the the characteristics of the area, I went through the census data, it's actually slightly less demand than what the ordinance is asking for.
So can you explain to me how it's going to be managed? You just said it can be managed, so just give me an idea about that, because I'm a Jersey City person and parking is...
Sure. Yeah, so it can be managed based on the hours of operation if they decide to end that before before residents would be coming home. Even if there's an overlap, those residents would be coming home as staff would be also leaving. So that's where the shared parking approach comes into play.
Go ahead.
So, how big's the medical office again? The size of it?
It's just over 7,000 square feet.
Okay.
7,100 square feet.
Okay. That would include rooms, some other stuff. You don't know what kind of medical office it's going to be at this point anyway, correct?
Correct.
So, like, this is sort of like maybe this, maybe that. Like we were talking about, maybe a condition or two for the kind of medical office, so we could, staff and others, you still have to check in with them on conditions to make sure that it's appropriate. But someone brought up pharmacy before, and a lot of medical offices now have pharmacies in their medical offices that can be utilized by the public as well. I've seen it, it's common. So my suggestion would be to somehow incorporate a pharmacy within that medical office as well, so that this way the residents, I think someone brought that up already, could utilize that, and now it becomes a little bit more of a public amenity to the people that live in the area. So that would be my strong suggestion, to do that, especially being that you don't have a tenant, you don't know who the medical office is going to be at this point. Let's say it isn't medical, I don't know. Let's say you put a supermarket, I don't know, a 7,000-foot supermarket. That's still a possibility, it sounds like to me, because you haven't really filled that space out yet. But that shouldn't be the basis of this building, this project. That's something that everyone has to work together on. And I think, you know, as you mentioned, it's a condition that maybe we should think about. And I don't know how that, in terms of that, or we rely on staff for that, but that's something I think you guys should consider when it comes to the medical office.
Sure. Yeah, and again, it's not atypical, especially in multi-use buildings, and it's in this stage, to not have a tenant yet. And so it's, you know, something that can be worked out. It can be managed with appointments as well, potentially limiting number of appointments per hour. So there are ways to work with that. And again, the owner applicant is obviously hearing these concerns and can be sensitive when choosing this particular tenant.
Yeah, the ironic part is
when you said another condition, you said, which is a good one, the thing about pharmacy, but also you said you'd limit the number of appointments. How would you do that with a doctor's office or something? You couldn't do that. You couldn't, yeah. Not if it's urgent care or anything of that sort.
Sorry, I'm sorry, we were conferring, and apologies for jumping in. But so two things. One, it is agreed that a pharmacy would be an appropriate use, excuse me, and that might be tailored to specifically the seniors and things like that. But it could be a pharmacy that also worked for the public. But the point is, the seniors do have a need for pharmacies, so it could be an immediate filling an immediate need. The other thing that ownership is willing to do is limit the hours of operation. So in the event that more of the parking than anticipated, I still believe Connor's testimony speaks to additional spaces. But if we needed to limit the hours of the medical facility, let's call it a community medical facility, to ensure that residents of the building had their parking spaces at night, that would not be a problem. And so whatever that means, 5 o'clock p.m., 6 o'clock p.m., when people are coming home from work, we're happy to comply with that. And we feel like we can make it work.
Okay, that's a good condition. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Because I do have another question. No, I'm good. Okay. So I did hear people talk about the damage to the old building, and Medical Center is an old building. I know it's a pretty strong building, but it's still an old building with tunnels. Are there any plans or thoughts have anyone put forth in order to try to minimize any of the damage that could occur?
Yes. So we've being that this project has been ongoing for quite some time, we've been able to explore a number of different things. And so one of the things we have been exploring more recently is how construction would actually work on this site. So there's a couple of mediating factors. First, we have the slope from Beacon Way, right? And so the nice thing is on the west side of the building, there's a road, not buildings. Now, roads have foundations, they're infrastructure, but that can be managed with, basically temporary retaining walls, right? So supportive excavation, as it's called, that would allow for sheathing to be placed around the site. We deal with the Roxy in the same way and try to minimize vibration. Now, the other thing that is to our advantage is we talked about the 30-foot slope. Right? Our site, if you looked at it, the existing condition in section, it's practically a triangle, right? So in terms of the amount of soil that we need to remove, half of it is removed already given the existing condition, right? So we aren't excavating 4 stories of bedrock, right? And we have some geotechnical information. There probably will be piles. But piles are driven, all over town. And I will mention that there have been and continue to be tall buildings immediately adjacent to the Beacon. There's one on Jordan. There's one called the Triangle that's right up Montgomery Street by Bergen that are being planned that are all dealing with these conditions. And I think, the city construction office does a really, really good job making sure that everyone stays on point. We as architects attempt to do a really good job making sure everyone stays on point. And I trust that this building will be built professionally, and if things come up, we will deal with them. This was a conversation that I've had with the community several times. I've offered that they can give me a call, and we're happy to work with them.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just one more. Well, on top of that, I was just going to say, the closest building to this building is actually the other building owned by the applicant, which is Jones Hall. So I would think the last thing anybody would want is damage to his own building as he's constructing it. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so to speak.
Thank you.
So that's number one. Number two, the park itself. You said there's going to be like green space or a park on Corneliuson Avenue, right?
That's correct.
That's something that Corneliuson Avenue lacks. I can't think of anything green on Corneliuson Avenue right now.
And I want to just also reiterate, and this is part of Mr. Shizvet talked about that. He's over there, but so we had to because of the zoning that we fell under, right? And this is why we're asking for the D6 for the medical use. We had to maintain our previous stormwater management system, which was retainage. Now, today in 2025. Stormwater has to be managed more passively, right? And so in speaking with the MUA said, fine, we'll allow you to do your retainage, as Mr. Shizvet testified to, but we'd also like some passive strategies implemented, right? So that's when I talked about the green roof, but more importantly, we have a 5,600 square foot approximately plot of land right on Corneliuson that will be green. I mean, it is a park for use by residents as well as a rain garden. And that rain garden is going to do passive retainage and slow the recharge of water back at a point that happens to be one of the lowest points in the city, as has been mentioned by one or two of the community members.
Okay, if we have no other questions, I'd like to hear from the staff.
Yeah, I want to remind the board that this is an application with two components. It is a minor subdivision with C variances and a preliminary and final major site plan with C and D variances. I want to emphasize that in the R4 zoning, there's something unique in it. It's been there for a very long time. Senior housing is permitted according to the R1 standards, with the exception of height. Height is allowed per the high-rise apartment building standard in R4, which is the 110 feet. We're not looking at the height of the Jones Hall building, as it's a pre-existing non-conforming condition with the subdivision, but there are some C variances that are associated with that subdivision. Given the lot size at 2,800 and change, 28,000 and change, they would be able to make a conforming lot per the R1 standards, avoiding some of the C variances associated on the Jones Hall lot with their subdivision. Potentially leaving some balance of land for another lot that could be developed for R4 standards or per some sort of condition should this subdivision application be denied. So it leaves kind of an interesting hole that I assume initiated some of the study of this lot for the future or for the development that we're considering here tonight. The D variances are associated with the site plan application. So we heard the D1 variance for the use, the medical use. There's been testimony that it's inherently beneficial. We've been talking through some of the conditions that were put on the record. One, to limit the medical use to foot traffic-oriented medical, such as Horizon, and a willingness, and I'm not sure if that was put on the record or offered up by the applicant, but a willingness to limit the hours of operation to 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. The parking that's been provided is split into two categories. One, to address the senior housing minimum parking requirement of 0.2 per bedroom, and the 0.5 minimum parking requirement for the R4 standard. There has been a lot of time in the life of this application. Under the new standards, should this application be denied, one, they would have no parking requirement for the medical use. Medical uses were widely permitted throughout the city, following on the heels of COVID. And it was apparently clear that at the time we needed to encourage those uses to be more prevalent and easier to permit. In addition, the R1 standards have been amended, and at one time, senior housing was allowed through a conditional use, which in many respects was something that the community did not like, because it allowed for 8-story buildings in the R1 district. And it was argued by many applicants that because 8 stories was allowed in that district, that 8 stories could be permitted somewhere. So that standard was removed. And subsequently, all the other use-specific conditions, bulk-related standards that went with that use. So now, if R4 still points to R1, they'd be by the regular standards in R1. So a 25 by 100 lot would be a conforming lot, and this building being the size it is would probably be able to conform with the subdivision standards even easier than what they did in 2019. Sorry if that's confusing, and a lot of backstory. This application has had several witnesses. We've heard about the architectural, civil, and planning testimony, as well as now the traffic. We had some questions that were answered by the commissioners' questions, or I had some questions that were answered by commissioners, and them asking of the testimony, which I'm glad to hear. With regards to the gym or the parking for Jones Hall and deliveries and such, as well as the green infrastructure, which they were addressed further through civil. This is a complicated application. It has history going to the HPC. We talked about what transpired there. One of the reasons why the application was ultimately not recommended to this board was site and setting, but the recommendation was split on its vote, as well as the staff, historic staff, recommended approval. It could easily be said that no building is meant to be here. At the same time, it's easy to say that an 18-story building does fit in with the character of the larger context of the site. Again, they are able to make a subdivision at this site per the R4 standards. This application has made a great effort to make a building that is meeting in the site and setting as best as they can. It is subordinate to the motifs and architecture of the larger site. It is modern, which is what you are supposed to do according to the Secretary of Interior standards when adding new construction to a historic site. You are not supposed to simply mimic an older building. It is supposed to be of its own time. I think this application, with regards to their planning proofs, put the testimony on the record to support the variances. I would ask if the applicant has reviewed the staff memos provided by engineering and city planning, and if they've reviewed the conditions that are recommended by staff should the commissioners put on a motion to approve this application.
The applicant has read all of the reports, and the applicant agrees to comply with all of the conditions set forth in those reports.
With the added conditions put on the record, I would just like to confirm if they were in agreement to limiting the hours of operation, or if that is something that the commissioners would like to consider in studying this application.
The applicant can note for the record that they are willing to agree to a condition limiting the hours.
And a pharmacy.
And is that 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. as stated on the testimony?
6 p.m.
Okay. I am here for any, and I'm sorry? And an addition of pharmacy. I'm here if there are any questions about this application.
That's correct. The applicant agrees.
I'm here if there are any questions about this application beyond what I've just explained. Thank you.
Okay, with that said, do any of the commissioners have any additional comments or questions? Okay, so
Matt, do you want this in two motions, one for the subdivision, one for the application?
That's typically how we do these applications, yes.
Yes, the subdivision.
Subdivision first, okay. Okay, so at this time, I am asking for a motion to vote on a subdivision of the property. Can I get a motion?
I give you the second to vote on.
I'll make a motion for, on the subdivisions on the site.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyle?
Subdivision.
You good?
No. What's the matter, Bridget? Oh.
To approve it, not yes to approve. Oh, sorry.
Can't say approve. Okay.
Commissioner?
Approve.
Okay, Commissioner Boyle? I'll just start.
Approve.
Okay. Commissioner Patel?
Yes.
Commissioner Burns?
Approve.
Commissioner Barron?
Yes.
Acting Vice Chair Zablicki?
Yes.
Madam Chair Coyle?
Yes. Okay.
Motion carries 6 in favor, none opposed of the subdivision.
Subdivision, okay. Yes. I am now asking for a motion to vote on approval for the building, the new building site that is being proposed.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You tell me something.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the site plan.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Commissioner Boyle?
Approve.
Commissioner Patel?
Approve.
Commissioner Burns?
Approve.
Commissioner Barron?
Yes.
Acting Vice Chair Zablicki?
Yes.
And Madam Chair Coyle?
Okay, so I don't, personally, for me, a compelling argument was not made this evening for me to vote yes and grant the variances. What you are requesting a variance is to build what you want when you could be building something that fits more into the neighborhood and within compliance with what is there. So I vote no.
Motion carries 5 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you. So at this time, do we have any other board business that we have to take care of at this time tonight? Nothing?
No.
Okay, so can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay.